across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
There you are. Good evening and welcome to the Political Asylum right here on Talk. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan and I'll be steering you through 3 throttling hours of breaking news, challenging views and dynamic debate. You know the drill. Get involved, get it off your chest, get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000, or you can WhatsApp voice note me on the same number and I promise to play your message out. Can't say fairer than that, can I? It's Monday, March the 3rd. Here's what's coming up. As Two-Tier Keir appoints himself warrior-in-chief and vows to lead a so-called European coalition of the willing to carry on backing Ukraine, what do you think? Do you believe that Britain and the EU should carry on backing Zelensky without the help of America? Because that clearly is the way we're headed. Or, after his latest angry post on Truth Social, should we back Donald Trump's aggressive drive for peace and along the way save ourselves billions of pounds, which would make life easier in the cost of living crisis? What do you reckon? 0344 499 1000. In other news, and still they come, a record 592 migrants crossed the channel illegally yesterday, the highest number in a single day since the beginning of the year. So the massive ongoing invasion continues apace, while the British government renews its pathetically ineffective £500 million deal, £500 million with the French for the gendarmes to patrol their own beaches, which, as we know only too well, they haven't been doing properly ever since they banked the cheque. Any people smuggling gangs smashed yet at all? None? What? No, I thought not. Even one? No. 0344 499 1000. What is Starmer doing to tackle our migrant crisis? It's getting worse by the day, and he's hoping that we won't think about it while he's playing soldier-in-chief for Ukraine. Well, we do think about it and we want answers. Meanwhile, after Starmer and his socialist gang were forced to confront reality and divert money from the fatuous foreign aid budget to defence, is net zero next? Can we afford to indulge crazy Ed Miliband's eco-zealotry for much longer? Is it good news that the Westminster word is that this gormless green nutcase could be set for the axe in Starmer's spring cabinet reshuffle? How would you feel about that? Ed Miliband getting the sack from Net Zero Secretary. Would you join me for a period of mass national mourning? 0344 499 1000. Also tonight, the NHS blows £100 million a year on treating trans people. That is more than it spends on penicillin and enough money to hire 2,500 nurses. Who said West Streeting was going to fix our broken health service? If you are West, perhaps you should get to grips with this ludicrous situation. 0344 499 1000. Plus, the latest on the scandal engulfing the BBC, as it is revealed that the state broadcaster's news chief watched the propaganda documentary Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone 3 weeks before it was screened. The executive in question is Deborah Turnus, who apparently just assumed everything was A-OK and didn't ask any questions. Had she have done so, she might have learned that the 13-year-old star of the anti-Israel show was the son of a senior Hamas official, and BBC money had ended up in the pockets of an illegal terrorist organisation. You cannot overstress the egregious nature of this. Should heads roll over this terrible error? And if so, how about Ms Turnus gets her marching orders first? 0344 499 1000. And humiliation for Angela Rayner as the Deputy Prime Minister's ludicrous right to switch off clause is chopped out of the Workers' Rights Bill. This was the bit that would have banned bosses from contacting their staff out of work hours. Another case of these unworldly Labour ideologues colliding with reality. Also tonight, meet the mother whose daughter died of a drug overdose who wants to legalise drugs. And finally, if you think Ukraine is bad, wait until China invades Taiwan. All hell will break loose. Many experts believe it might be sooner rather than later. Stay tuned for the chilling details. All that and so much more, so don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Monday night together. Calls already coming in thick and fast, and with me in the studio is my fellow Talk presenter, excellent political commentator too. Welcome to Russell Quirk. Hi, Ross.
Good evening. We'll see about that.
Let's
see how the hour goes.
That's what I'm saying now. I may revise my opinion in 10 minutes' time, but let's see what he has to say. You're on the rack, mate. No, you and I usually agree on most things, and I think we're going to agree on this. You know, I don't necessarily approve of what went on in the Oval Office on Friday afternoon, although I'm of mixed minds about it. I mean, first of all, people say that should never happen in public. What is wrong with the public seeing raw politics? What is wrong with us actually getting to see what happens behind closed doors, only this time in public? And I would also suggest that, you know, Trump is angling for a peace deal, and the more I think about it, the more I am in favour of what he wants and against what Zelensky wants, which is a continuation of this war. And all these EU people, you know, Starmer's coalition of the willing, you know, all these EU losers he called to Downing Street yesterday, including him, I can't help remembering that this was the crowd who told us, let's keep locking down forever. Let's never let the people out. Let's vaccinate babies and their dogs, and so on and so forth. These people who are saying, let's carry on with this war, it's very important, geopolitics, the power of Russia, I get that. I know we've got to be careful here. But the very same people who were leading us down that COVID path to nowhere, that lunatic path to nowhere, are the same people now telling us we must carry on giving billions and billions of pounds to Ukraine and backing Ukraine militarily. And for that reason, I'm doubtful about them.
Yeah, so let's talk about the transparency bit first. You know, we often criticise the fact that politicians do stuff behind closed doors and there's no transparency. We don't really know what they're up to. You know, thanks to the likes of Alistair Campbell, we now live in what we call a post-truth political environment. So actually, I think there's an element of what happened in the White House on Friday that we should celebrate. The fact that I think it was real. Now, you can say as a conspiracy theorist all you like that it was all staged and there's hidden agendas and it was all set up. I don't think that's true. I think it was a very, very genuine altercation because Zelensky changed his behaviour midway through that conversation and also came to the White House having said that he was going to sign a deal and then made it very, very clear that he was not going to. The people that have criticised that meeting, actually, Kev, are generally the people that watch the last 7 or 8 minutes of that video. You have to watch the whole 50 minutes to get context.
I mean, the main thing he did, because this rare earth mineral deal was on the point of being signed.
Yep.
And by the way, in case anybody thinks Trump has imposed this very lucrative deal on Ukraine, Zelensky has been pursuing it now almost since the beginning of the war, because he knows that if he can get America to invest in Ukrainian minerals, if America has got skin in the game, great big
They've got a stake in the
units, then they will defend Ukraine.
Yep.
So he came to the White House on Friday with a bit of paper
on the premise
ready for this to be signed.
Yeah.
And just before Donald Trump began to put his laborious signature on that document, Zelensky said, yeah, but you can't sign this unless you guarantee that you will back us up against Russia in the event of a re-invasion. And at that point, I think Trump and Vance just said, don't you come in here pushing us around.
Well,
we'll sign your deal, but you are not, as Trump said, you are not holding the cards.
Yeah, but not just pushing around him. It was very disingenuous of him to give the impression to Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, that deal was being signed over lunch. And as one Republican commentator
never
said
got
on
to
Twitter,
have that lunch, did they?
No, he got thrown out.
Rosemary chicken.
Yes,
well,
it would have been.
Creme brulee.
Would have been.
No, that's what it was.
Which they gave to the security
Yeah,
guards.
no, just the staff apparently just descended on it and sat there and ate it.
Yeah. So look,
no waste. Elon Musk would have been pleased.
Let's just look at this practically, right? And without trying to take sides, as in pro-Trump, pro-Zelensky, that I think sends us down the wrong kind of rabbit hole in terms of that bias that many people are displaying. In other words, people that don't like Trump are saying, well, Zelensky's right, and and vice versa. The reality of that was, A, he moved the goalposts, Zelensky, and the other aspect, I think, is that Zelensky has kind of trotted around the world for the last 3 years. Bearing in mind we are now 3 years into this war and nothing has moved. I mean, really, we've seen no gaining of ground by either. All we're seeing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis is a loss of lives and a whole load of money. So Zelensky's trotting around the world saying, almost in a very arrogant, expectant way, give me more money. So what
Give
Trump
me more
has
weapons
done,
as well.
Yeah. And what Trump, I think, has tried to do here is to say, look, if we stop giving you the money, you're in a position where you're going to have to do a deal, right? Now, that deal has to be done whether Zelensky likes it or not. Although Zelensky has said, I'm not doing a deal on land, I'm not going to give an inch, Putin needs to pay reparations and so on. Do we really think that Putin is the sort of man that's going to say, okay then? So Trump is backing him into a corner in order to elicit peace.
Okay, and I think Trump will continue this process. He's still very much at the centre of it, and I think his willpower alone is going to force people to the table. But
he's going to turn the money off.
But given that Starmer, as I say, is now repositioning himself as Europe's warrior in chief, setting up this coalition of the willing. France now saying also that it will put boots on the ground to keep the peace. Britain's already pledged that. I mean, really? Are Europe really going to carry on doing this without America's backing? Well, because that's what Starmer's saying, and I don't think Europe will do it.
Well, I'm afraid when it comes to the politics of that, I'm not sure that Europe, least not the UK, have voted for that. Now, I think this is such a grave situation, the politics of it, the geopolitics of it, but the money side, I mean, of course, inexplicably on Saturday, I think it was Rachel Reeves assigned to lend another £2 billion of our money to Zelensky. Well, I didn't vote for that. I don't know many people that did. So I think before Starmer goes off and decides that he is basically going to bankroll this indefinite war forever. I mean, he signed a 100-year deal with the Ukraine. In other words, no one seems to be interested in an outcome. They're just going to fund it unsustainably forever. So I think the European population and the UK population, before we go any further, have got to be asked a question. I think there needs to be a referendum on it.
The European political elite, the body politic of Europe, including Britain, always seems to want to have something to dangle over their population's head, saying, well, there are higher matters at stake here, stuff that you can't be involved in, but you need to know we're carrying on down this line. We are carrying on, even though you might not like it. We're going to support Ukraine because it's very important geopolitically on the world stage in terms of tempering Russian power. We get all that, but it just strikes me, it reminds me of exactly the rhetoric that we were subjected to in the COVID crisis. You lot don't understand. We as national leaders have to do this to save the planet, to save the people. Did they really? Did they really? They didn't need to do those lockdowns. It's a way of enshrining their power and telling us we have to do what we're told. So when the people of Britain say we're not so sure about this Zelensky guy and we're not so sure we want eternal war, I think they should be respected. What my view is, I do understand it. I do understand it's not just like give Putin what he wants and let's back out of there. It's got to be a tough deal. But the alternative to following President Trump in his drive for peace is that this war will go on and on and on at the cost of hundreds of thousands of young men's lives, month in, month out.
And that's exactly where we are now. So as I say, 3 years on, and there's been no progress. I mean, Zelensky said in the White House, there's no point in diplomacy. That doesn't get us anywhere. There's no point in ceasefires because that always gets broken. I mean, talk about a defeatist, negative attitude. He's also trying to push us down the route of of Ukraine joining NATO, knowing that as soon as that happened, we would effectively trigger World War III, because the United States and France and Spain and Germany and Britain would all have to then go to war with Russia on the basis that Ukraine, as a member of NATO, because of that collective responsibility, would compel us to do so. But Kev, the question from me is, what is it about the left that likes war
Exactly.
so much? Why do they like... I mean, going back to the Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair days, the reason we don't trust governments when it comes to war is because of people like Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair that took us to war in Iraq under false pretences.
COVID and war present the same spectre to people. That is one of terror.
Yep.
What useless, weak, rubbishy governments do is they try to tell their long-suffering populations, you need us to protect you, to keep you out of danger. So they tried to tell us during the COVID crisis, well, you need us because we will steer you through this massive medical crisis. I mean, yes, it was a medical crisis. It wasn't nearly as bad as they made out. With all due respect to everybody who suffered terribly and lost loved ones, I'm not trying to undermine that in any way, but it wasn't as bad as they made out. You have to remember, COVID had a massive survival rate, very low lethality, fatality rate. So there's that. But they told us, yes, you've got to carry on. And if you don't look to us, you're in trouble. Your safety in our hands. Well, it's the same with this war. It's just I'm getting a bit sick of these political elites turning round to the people who express their doubts. Loads of people in Britain express their doubts. I know my audience expresses their doubts, and they've got every right to do so, and I'm not sure I want to be slapped down by a two-bit pipsqueak like Keir Starmer telling me it's very important that we carry on. And frankly, you know, what have Germany done so far? What have France done so far? Do we really believe, Russell, that if push comes to shove, that they will send their troops in? It'll be down to us.
Of course, and look,
they won't do anything.
But look at the EU's response to any crisis. I mean, look at their response to COVID. I mean, it took them months to roll out their vaccines, which we managed to do because we weren't part of the EU anymore, by the way, in weeks rather than months. Look, we need to understand here that if we withdraw the money, it brings Zelensky to the negotiating table. He might not like that very much, but whilst we keep funding his habit of war, and I will put it as strongly as that in those terms, we keep funding his habit of war, this war is going to go on and on and on forever. There is no incentive for Putin to bring it to a close, certainly no incentive for Zelensky. And the other thing, of course, is there are lots of conspiracy theorists right now saying, well, you know, maybe there is some connection between all of these weapons being purchased and sent to Zelensky and the fact that we've got certain, I'll mention no names, but certain funders in private equity and so on that fund those very companies. You can understand why people are starting to join the dots. Maybe they're adding 2 and 2 and making 5.5, but war equals profit. We know that. So you can understand why the public are saying, hang on, this stinks. Maybe this is just all about money.
Yeah. Maybe they get a deal together with Putin. Putin could lay off and they could have an election.
Yeah. Would you see what Putin did on the minerals? Yesterday he said, actually, I've got loads of minerals, Donald Trump. Do you want to come and talk to me about my minerals?
Yeah, probably would. Well, just before we go to break, we've got lots of footage from over the weekend, a very active weekend, obviously. I think the one we'll go for, this is Keir Starmer, who has been like a sort of fox caught in the headlights on all of this. He's desperately trying to sort of not annoy Donald Trump while staying in with the Europeans, pursuing, as Russell says, his kind of mysterious interest in this war, trying to walk a kind of tightrope, not particularly successfully, but here he is on that incredible spat, that incredible row in the Oval Office on Friday afternoon.
My efforts continued on Thursday when I met President Trump in the White House to strengthen our relationship with America. Now, what happened in his subsequent meeting with President Zelensky is something nobody in this House wants to see. Yeah. But I do want to be crystal clear. We must strengthen our relationship with America. Yeah. For our security, for our technology, for our trade and investment. And we will never choose between either side of the Atlantic. Yeah. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if anything, the past week has shown that that idea is totally unserious. Yeah. This week has shown with total clarity that the US is vital in securing the peace we all want to see in Ukraine.
What planet is he on? I think you find that Donald Trump just walked out on the whole deal, Keir, and you better go along with what he wants. Otherwise, there won't be a deal. I mean, he's fantasising.
And can I just suggest that, you know, perhaps the way to strengthen relationships between the UK and the US is not for your entire front bench to call the now president a racist, Ku Klux Klan loving bigot. Yeah. That might help, mightn't it? Relationships.
And by the way, there's some really interesting audio of Trump and J.D. Vance before the bust-up with Zelensky. They were actually talking about Keir Starmer and the lack of freedom of speech in Britain.
Yes.
They don't hold any candles for Keir Starmer.
And the mobile phone thing.
As I've always said, Trump and Vance regard Keir Starmer as just another weak, woke, loser European leader.
Socialist.
And I would say they're exactly right in all this. Yeah, I mean, good question from Russell. Why is it you think that Keir Starmer and indeed the other EU leaders, are so keen on prolonging this war? And aren't they on some kind of fool's mission? Because seriously, if we carry on like this, we are going to have to conduct this war without any help from America, no financial or military help whatsoever. And that, I think Rachel from accounts just sent them 2.2 billion. I think we've already sent them in total about 13 billion or something. That is going to affect you, folks. The cost of living crisis will get worse and worse and worse. The economy will tumble, purely so we can carry on backing Ukraine. I'm not taking a line on that. Well, what do you want? Do you want that to continue? Or do you want Trump to force a peace deal that would end this horrible bloody war in the east? Let me know. 03444991000. That next. Stay tuned.
His Majesty has given a very gracious invitation to the President of the United States. He's done that on the basis that he recognises and knows that America is a deep ally of ours. You know, the depth of our relationship, not only is it historic, but it's a practical one on a day-to-day basis. They are our number one ally, and that visit will not happen immediately. We are consistent allies, and, you know, we should always work together to make state visits, support His Majesty in these endeavours to make these visits a success.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Loads of calls and messages about Trump, Zelensky, Vance, Starmer. That incredible bust-up. I mean, they talk about, oh, we're so worried about World War III. For a little while on Friday afternoon, I thought it had broken out in the Oval Office. I mean, seriously. But Trump, only about an hour ago, posted on his Truth Social media site that the thing he's very furious about is Zelensky saying that the conclusion of this war is a long way off. And Trump wants to force it through very, very quickly. Do you believe Trump is right, that we can get peace fairly quickly? Or is Zelensky right, that any kind of peace is a long way off? And if we go down the latter route, if we could go down the Zelensky route, the peace is a long way off, we continue backing Ukraine on our own, Britain and Europe, because Americans will not help us. Your thoughts, 03444991000. Let's move on. Let's talk about the migrant crisis. On Saturday, Russ, bad enough. This time of year, the migrant crossings, the numbers go down a lot because the weather's bad. Now, you may have noticed quite nice over the weekend. So suddenly on Saturday, 68 more migrants crossed the channel illegally. These voyages are against the law because they're not registered as vessels, and also the passengers, the migrants, never have any documents on them, so they break the law on a number of levels. So that was on Saturday, and yesterday, oh my God, 592 migrants made the crossing. I think it was in 11 boats, as many as that, and so a huge day. That's the biggest single day's worth of migrants this year in a single day. That's the highest number. That is high, 592. Meanwhile, we got this information to the backdrop of the fact that Britain has renewed that absurd deal that Rishi Sunak made with Macron. I think it was about two years ago. Yeah. It was a deal whereby we gave France, if you've got any ideas why we did this, please let me know, 03444991000, because I'm damned if I can work it out. We gave them £500 million, $500 million for the gendarmes to patrol their own beaches. Which they took the money, banked it, and then didn't patrol their own beaches, and have stood by watching migrant after migrant, dinghy after dinghy, boat after boat leave those benighted beaches of northern France and head off to Britain with the French police waving. We've renewed that deal now. And quite what difference that is going to make, I don't really know. But Tony Abbott, Russell, the former Australian Prime Minister, who, by the way, within about 2 weeks of becoming Prime Minister, I think it was in 2013, solved the Australian migrant crisis overnight by saying, if you arrive here illegally on an illegal boat, your asylum application is automatically negated. If you come here illegally, you cannot get asylum. Simple as that. We haven't got the resolve to do that. He stopped their migrants coming mostly from Indonesia towards northern Australia. Similar numbers, probably higher numbers than we get, thousands coming in every day. He stopped it in 2 weeks flat by announcing that. If you come here illegally, there's no chance, 100% you don't get asylum. Why can't we do that?
So one of the signs of madness, Kev, is to carry on doing the same thing but expecting a different outcome. So we've given
Einstein, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So I don't think Starmer and Reeves have got the memo, or Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. So we have already given, albeit under the previous government, as you say, £500 million that wasn't spent. It was just stuck in the bank very nicely, and it's made literally zero difference. One of the things that the French had promised to do, I mean, you would imagine this was part of some kind of written contract or something. They were supposed to spend £12 million building a detention centre in northern France to hold these individuals. Yeah. camp to hold these individuals to kind of stop
They
them coming in.
reneged on that.
Well, they just didn't do it. Now they're saying, oh, well, if you give us another $500 million, we promise we'll do it this
Well, I
time.
don't know what money is involved, but there's been no mention of money. But if we're giving the French more money, I think we need to investigate. But it looks as if you quite rightly suggest, Russell, we're giving them more money. This time they say they will build this detention centre in Dunkirk that they failed to build last time. Don't really care whether they do or not. But as I said, Tony Abbott was in this country a couple of weeks ago. Very eloquent he is on migrant crises, knows his onions.
Well, he's the man that knows.
He said the problem you have in this country, you can do as many deals as you like with the French, but innately, the French don't want to stop the migrants. They don't want them in their country.
Well, it's obvious,
they want to wave goodbye to them, and that's what they like doing. Yeah. There was a famous incident once, right, soon after this £500 million deal, where a French cop was seen on the beach, was photographed puncturing two dinghies, and you thought, good, they're starting to do their job. Apparently he was hauled in the next day and said, don't you ever do that again.
Yes, well, and of course, if you were a French politician or a French member of the public, you'd also want to encourage those individuals to leave the country, wouldn't you? Because of course they are causing trouble there, causing a drain on the economy there, the same as they then do here. That's why France rejects most asylum applications from these individuals, but we accept most. So you know that you get a second go. You go to France, which you might prefer, they say no about 60% of the time, about 80 or 90% of the time we just say yes, even though if you can't say who you are or where you're from or why you're actually fleeing so-called persecution. What I would suggest is that we have those camps on our shores, so when these individuals turn up on their boats, we stick them straight into a detention camp, we process them immediately and send them back. We also have a deterrent in the English Channel. This is obviously what the likes of Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage and Lee Anderson have been talking about. It's not that difficult to do, just to have a slight British naval presence in the Channel.
Except for the Navy have refused to carrying out these orders.
Then that's insubordination. They all need to be put in the wherever they go.
They say that that's against maritime law and dangerous.
Yeah, well, they'll do as they're told by the Commander-in-Chief, I would imagine.
Well, no, they've already refused to do that. They did refuse to do that.
Well, that would need to be dealt with, in my view, in the same way as we deal with the same kind of civil servants that decide they want to do their own thing.
What? Let them get on with it?
Well, fire them all.
That's what. Yeah, but we haven't fired them, will we?
No, but we absolutely
we'll allow them to carry on.
We should fire 100,000 civil servants anyway, regardless of any blame.
But we won't, will we?
But then the other thing that we should do, and again, I'm fairly, tired of rehearsing this because it's so obvious, but I've said it so many times, and I know you have. Stop the benefits. Stop the education, stop the NHS, stop the dentistry, stop the 46 quid a week that they get, stop the accommodation, take away the incentive. Guess what happens? And they stop coming. And
especially don't pay for their lawyers.
Yes.
We give these people hundreds of thousands of pounds to fight their case to stay here.
25 million quid last week.
To fight their case to stay here. And I'd be surprised if it was only 25 million. We'd have spent a lot more on legal aid, on asylum seekers.
So what do we think the French are doing? The French are laughing at us, aren't they?
Of course they are.
They're laughing.
And here's another thing here's a new initiative. Today we learned the government has now set up a new £5 million crack immigration squad, a new immigration squad. This is to speed up deportations of jailed foreign criminals. Why do we need a £5 million special squad to kick out crooks who have no right to be here? Why are we going to spend £5 million quid?
We've already got a border force.
Just kick them out.
Or rather, border farce. We've already got a police service, 147,000 police officers in Britain, by the way. We also have an army and a navy. I mean, we have plenty of resources to get rid of these people, particularly if they've committed offences, or we know that they've committed offences in other countries. And we probably don't, because I bet we don't even bother fingerprinting them when they come over. So there's plenty of resource to deport people. We don't need to spend more money. You know what this is, Kevin? And we do know what this is. It's just more headlines.
Headlines, yeah.
So that the government can say, look at what we're doing.
Crack squad.
Yeah.
And all this kind of
thing. We're smashing this, we're cracking that.
Smashing the gang.
But they're smashing and cracking nothing.
By the way, one last thought to digest, folks, before we go to break. Don't forget that when the Labour government came in July the 5th, one of their first announcements was to get rid of the Rwanda scheme, our only deterrent. That was a great idea, wasn't it? We'd wasted 700 million quid on that. Starmer just shoved it in the bin. like, pathetic and petulant and childish. £700 million worth of taxpayers' money investment just down on some sort of political whim. It's a gimmick. So he did that. And then he set up, him and Calamity Cooper, the Home Secretary, set up the Border Security Command. Couldn't find anyone to run it. This was the crack squad.
It took 4 months to find someone.
September they found someone. September. They finally found a guy called Martin Hewitt, 200 grand a year, former copper. He said on day one, well, smashing the gangs won't solve the crisis. So that was good for a kick-off. He was then supplied with £175 million of state-of-the-art equipment, to track down the evil people smuggling gangs and to smash them. So £175 million, £200,000 a year guy, loads of other staff being hired. How many people smuggling gangs has the government smashed so far? I know, zero. Absolutely none. This, folks, is a terrible, terrible waste of money. If you don't stop the migrants, you will never solve the migrant crisis. We better go.
Kev, quick one.
Very quickly.
Very quickly. I drove through Wethersfield yesterday, which will ring a bell with you. Wethersfield is the home of the RAF base that has been converted into a holiday camp, effectively, for migrants. There are now 800 migrants in that camp. They now outnumber the population of Wethersfield as a village. There are only 700 and something people that are the natural population of Wethersfield. I drove through it yesterday. It is a beautiful, lovely, quaint Old English village. Thatched houses, lovely old pub and so on. As I drove through the village and came out the other side, guess what I see walking along the road?
It's nothing but migrants.
Dozens and dozens and dozens of migrants just milling around looking for trouble.
That's the point, folks.
Real world example.
You've got illegal migrants there, or they'll say, oh, they're not illegal because they've applied for asylum. They turned up here illegally. They're illegal. And we should treat them as such, but for some reason we don't. So you've got them. And then, even worse, and I don't say this lightly, is our legal migration situation. We learned on Friday, got buried in all the Zelensky stuff, good day to bury bad news, that over the past year we've let in another 850,000 legal migrants. So what's happening here? You're getting 1 million a year coming in. 1 million a year. This is changing the face of Britain. It's changing what Britain looks like. It's changing what our population makeup looks like. Something is dying here, and it's due to our politicians and their ridiculous migration policies. Your thoughts, please. 0344 499 1000. Next up, could it be, please God, if there is a God, can Ed Miliband, the net zero nutter, get the sack? It's possible, folks. It's possible. Stay tuned to find out why.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, I'm sure you get out the violins now. I'm sure you'll be very upset to hear this, but there is a chance, so don't get overexcited, but there is a slim chance that Ed Miliband's Crazy Ed, the mad net zero zealot, the lunatic who's running this country to hell in a handcart due to his mad green insanity, could get the sack in Starmer's spring cabinet reshuffle. The point being, I mean, you know, 2 months ago they said not a chance in hell. Starmer's kind of mesmerised by his former boss Miliband, but Starmer, I think, is being made to collide with reality. So only last week he saw sense and raided the fatuous foreign aid budget to ramp up defence spending. So that the Labour lefties, Annalise Dodd, the International Development Minister, immediately quit.
Brilliant.
But exactly everything that's wrong with Labour politicians. Never mind about the welfare of British people.
But they didn't quit over the winter fuel allowance.
Yeah. You know, never mind about the welfare of the British people. But if you deprive foreigners of some of our foreign aid, then I will quit. I will signal my virtue and polish my halo very publicly. It's all about them, isn't it? Not about us. A proper, sensible politician, which maybe Starmer shows signs of turning into, he isn't one yet, but you never know, would say my priority is the welfare of the British people here. I'm not going to spend tons and tons of money on water systems in Chad when my own people are starving and freezing to death. So if we can go down that road, then that is good news. So he saw sense last week and said, let's stop wasting money on this foreign aid nonsense. Let's give it to defence. Now, speculation is now mounting that the Prime Minister may be ready to get real about the vast amounts of money being wasted on net zero. How much longer, really? That's the question, Russell. Can we indulge Ed Miliband? The amount of money he's spending on windmills, solar farms, axing exploration, killing off thousands of jobs. This is serious stuff, and only in the best of peace times could we indulge a guy like this. So the situation we're in now, surely Starmer will see sense and say, do you know what, Ed, I've been thinking you'd make a marvellous culture secretary.
Yeah, or make him Northern Ireland secretary, get him as far away as we possibly can, or foreign secretary, even better.
Well, no, that's an important job.
Actually, that might be dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, this has been leaked for a reason. This hasn't it? So I suspect he may well be on the way out. The reality is, and of course, look, this isn't just Ed Miliband. All this stuff that is being spent, all this stuff that is being wasted on net zero, the quest for net zero, has to be signed off. It has to be sanctioned by Keir Starmer. It has to be signed off by Rachel Reeves and the Treasury, of course. But I think the reality now that we are seeing the inevitable stuff that we have been talking about on this station for months and months and months, that net zero and economic growth are not conducive with each other.
Yeah.
Those two things are not compatible. And we now know, because of what's happening in the news, so for instance, the likes of mini production having been ceased in Britain, electric minis. So Mini has gone all electric. I don't know if you realise that. All minis are now electric only.
Right?
So they've now...
Mine isn't.
Of course. Yours will have a V8 in it, no doubt.
Yeah. Diesel. It's not diesel, actually. It's petrol.
So the reality is that that manufacturer and many others are deciding that they are having to tone down, scale back production, and there's even threat now that the likes of that mini plant, which I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's made vehicles in this country since I think the 1950s, might even have to close because, of course, it's geared up for EVs and there isn't the demand for them. Yeah. So then you've got BP rolling back on 3,000 jobs, largely because of net zero, telling everybody now that they're not going to carry on with their quest for net zero. So the reality is dawning, I think, for government that net zero is not compatible with a growing economy. And I guess, look, yes, Ed Miliband, I'm afraid, as the kind of the poster boy, the champion of such things, he's going to have to be the scapegoat. Let's hope.
He's also at the epicentre of what Labour imagined their government would be like when they were in opposition. So when they were 14 years, they sat there in opposition, getting more and more ideological, idealistic, naive, student politic-y by the day. Yeah, oh, we'll do this, net zero. We'll let all the migrants in. It's going to be marvellous. We'll help Ukraine, and so on and so forth. Now they've come into power. Reality has dawned on them.
The reality of office.
They have collided with reality. So hence, to furious opposition, Starmer raided the foreign aid budget last
Straight out the reform playbook.
Yeah, well, it's quite right too. There are more important things than whether or not some village in Chad has got a water irrigation system courtesy of Britain's foreign aid budget. The defence of this nation is more important to this nation than a Chad village's water irrigation system. I think you would agree. And the same has to be said of Ed Miliband's extremely expensive eco-nuttery. I mean, the man is insane. He's a serious danger, and I think that Starmer is going to have to turn around him and say, we can't spend all this money. We've got to get real. And by the way, can I have half of your budget? I need it for defence. I need it to carry on back in Ukraine.
Ukraine, yeah, indeed. So, if I was a cynic, which sometimes I can be, I'd also say that now that Labour have banked the money from the likes of Dale Vince famously donated £5 million to the Labour Party. Obviously, another eco-zealot, Dale Vince, who's obviously been on this station many, many times and has had his backside handed to him by various presenters. Now maybe that the checks have cleared, now Labour can say, well, OK, we've got the money, got elected. As is typical of politicians, now they can kind of pull the rug. So I think there's an element of that. But there's just a simple question of economics here, that you cannot spend upwards of £50 billion a year, maybe more, who knows what the real number is, in a quest to get to net zero and it not affect jobs, industry and the economy. And the economy, of course, is in worse shape than all of us thought it would be, even under Labour, certainly in worse shape than Rachel Reeves thought it would be. So yes, reality is dawning. And don't forget, we have a budget in about 3 weeks' time. It'll be very interesting to see exactly what Rachel Reeves does in that budget around net zero, to see if it is scaled back, but equally also around such things as taxation, because I suspect we will have a bit of a shock coming.
Yes, but I think Miliband might be in trouble, and if so, the day that Keir Starmer says to Ed, you've been amazing culture secretary, or I think your strengths could be best deployed from the back benches, will be a great day for this country. He is steering us into a swirling mass of lunacy that doesn't make any sense. All of his plans don't work. Everything that he says is scientifically true is scientifically untrue. Yep. This country cannot survive on renewables, as he likes to say.
But Kev, who replaces him? That's the worry. Who replaces him?
Well,
another equally nutty zealot?
Well, anybody has got to be better than Miliband. No, 100%. If Miliband goes, I don't care.
Did we say that about Sunak? Anyone will be better than Sunak?
Yeah, so you're saying he should stay there?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying.
Right, let's agree. Let's agree. It'd be great if Ed Miliband goes.
I'm not saying that at all.
I don't care about who comes in, because whoever comes in will be told, toe the line.
Good.
Will be told, toe the line. You're getting this job because you're not allowed to waste the money that idiot Miliband did.
So
him,
stop banging on about
going will be a good thing. Let's go to a break. And next up, talking of wastes of money, I'm not against trans treatment, but did you know over the last year, or generally every year, the NHS spends £100 million on trans treatments. That's more than it spends on penicillin. It's a bit skewed, isn't it? That next, stay tuned.
His Majesty has given a very gracious invitation to the President of the United States. He's done that on the basis that he recognises and knows that America is a deep ally of ours. You know, the depth of our relationship, not only is it historic, but it's a practical one on a day-to-day basis. They are our #1 ally, and that visit will not happen immediately. We are consistent allies, and, you know, we should always work together to make state visits, support His Majesty in these endeavours to make these visits a success.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Well, as you know, Russell, the NHS is in a constant state of financial starvation. It is cash-strapped, cash-strapped, cash-strapped. Give us more money, give us more money. We need more money. Well, it might help if they didn't spend £100 million a year on trans treatments. The NHS spends as much on transgender treatments as it does on antidepressants, penicillins and beta blockers. Over the past 5 years, the NHS has spent an eye-watering £250 million on surgical and non-surgical procedures for trans, non-binary and gender-questioning patients in England. Now, you know, I'm all for their treatment and all that, but £100 million a year?
So I cannot accept that the NHS, which was set up for clinical purposes, to fix people and to nurse them back to health, to look after them medically, should be looking after what is not a medical condition, as in someone that thinks that they are in the wrong body. It is a psychological condition. Why is the NHS spending our money on something that is either a psychological condition or indeed, dare I venture, controversially, something that is simply somebody's choice? £100 million when we have 7.5 million people on the NHS waiting list. The NHS, as you say, on its knees. You can't get an ambulance for hours, if not days sometimes. An incredibly inefficient organisation, but one that certainly consumes a lot of our money, £200 billion a year now. This is outrageous. And this is on top of course, the 50 million or so a year that is spent on NHS diversity, equity and inclusion.
Well, let's. They spend. They've got 800 DEI officers. It costs them £40 million a year. Now, £69 million of the £250 million spent over the past couple of years, 2.5 years, went on treating children and young people with trans issues.
So under 18s?
Well, it just says children and young people.
So why would
Well, it would have been under 18. That would be at
children?
that Frankenstein's Castle place, wouldn't it? The Tavistock Clinic.
Tavistock Clinic.
Where the place where children went to be mutilated.
So you can't drive a car till you're 17, you can't have an alcoholic drink, or you can't buy one till you're 18, and so on. But you can go and get gender changing treatment under the age of 18? I mean, what, because of parental consent? I mean, it's ghoulish.
I mean, when you got people, you know, waiting, you know, people got older people particularly, you know, basically going blind because they can't get cataract operations.
Yeah, but cancer patients, heart patients.
Cancer patients just not getting treatment at all sorts of it. Basically with the NHS, unless your impending surgery is life affecting, unless you're going to die, you're very unlikely to get your treatment anytime soon. Takes years. So many people, even cash-strapped people, just go, I'm going to have to go private. I can't waste this long. I've got a text from an old couple here saying that they've had to spend out hundreds of thousands of pounds on their surgery because they just couldn't wait for the NHS.
Because it's life or death.
But meanwhile, £100 million a year on trans.
But cancer treatment is life or death.
Yeah.
Trans treatment is not. How can that 100 million be devoted to, a whimsical thing, a psychological thing, as opposed to being devoted to saving people's lives that are in danger because of a heart or a cancer condition? It's abhorrent.
Yeah, but the thing is that the surgery, the A&E situation has to be that unless you have it, you die. Then they'll do it. But if it's not necessary to save your life, your chance of getting NHS surgery anytime soon is pretty slim.
Yeah, didn't we have the same debate, well, not you and I, but it was definitely debated years ago when it was discovered that the NHS was spending our money on breast implants, for instance, because certain women, understandably might want their breasts to be bigger. I get all that. Why the hell should I have to pay for that
yourselves,
when I frankly don't get the benefit?
Pay for it yourselves. It's just ridiculous. This is the BBC, the NHS, and the BBC as well, but the NHS being very, very woke, of course. That's where your money's going. £100 million a year on trans treatment. Is that what you want? 03444991000. Russell Quirk, great to have you always on a Monday. Another brilliant hour in the company of Russ. He'll be back next Monday. Let me know what you think of some of the things that he said and that I've said. 03444991000. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the BBC. More of that scandal. Stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, a lot of tonight's narrative seems to be revolving around Labour, our Labour government, our lousy Labour government, being forced to collide with reality. Some of their ludicrous student politics style airy-fairy ideas being scrapped because in the real world they're just not going to work. Now, recently when Angela Rayner unveiled her new workers' rights bill, This was all sorts of new clauses that were going to make life better for workers. Up the workers. It's like 1970s. That's where Angela still lives. But she came up with this bill, and they're still debating some of the clauses. But it looks as if Labour is the most ludicrous clause of her workers' rights bill was this, that bosses would be banned by law from contacting their staff out of work hours because they had a right to switch off. Now, how are you going to run a business like that? You know, sorry, this is classic politicians who don't understand the real world. They've never had a proper job, and they think that they can come up with crap like this. Well, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. Well, so many complaints have gone in from the world of business to Labour that it looks as if they're going to scrap Angela's ludicrous, ridiculous right to switch off clause. So that will be another blow for reality. So we'll deal with that in about 20 minutes' time. Also, towards the end of the hour, former neighbour of mine, a friend, Vicky Unwin, is going to come on. Now, her lovely daughter Louise, who I knew well, died of a ketamine overdose not so long ago, a few years back. Vicky is now, you might consider counterintuitively, leading a campaign to legalise drugs. She believes that's the way to control drug consumption. So we'll talk to Vicky later in the hour. Also, in half an hour, we'll be taking your calls. I've got a lot of calls about Starmer, about Trump, J.D. Vance, Zelensky. I mean, do you really care that they weren't very nice to Zelensky in the Oval Office? I don't give a damn, do you? I mean, OK, they didn't behave in the way that politicians normally do. They didn't sort of sanitise it for public consumption. They gave us it like it was. You could say they were rude. You could say they bullied him. I don't think you can bully a man like Zelensky. He's a grown man who has led his country through 3 years of hellish war. He's not the bully victim type, is he? That's stupid. That's ridiculous. Do they really care the way he was dressed? Don't know, don't care either. But all this focusing in on, but that's not the way you do it. Those scenes in the Oval Office were disgraceful. Who cares? They were what they were. We've got them. We know what Trump and Vance were up to. I think it went beyond what they envisaged, but I do think they wanted to make a statement to the world. We're forcing a peace deal through, and if you don't like it, you're on your own. That was their message, and they gave us that message. So that's my view on all of that. Let me know what you think. Are we focusing on nonsense? It doesn't matter, does it, whether or not they bullied him? This is the way these two guys are going to go about things. Let's get used to it. Let's be real. And is their desire for peace correct? Do you think they're doing the right thing? I just can't understand why everybody's going so crazy about, oh no, he mustn't stop the war. Let's carry on letting hundreds of thousands of young men die in the blood-soaked mud of those horrific eastern frozen fields, shall we? Shall we let that carry on? Or should we try and stop it? Is it so bad to try and stop it? Maybe you think I'm being naive. Maybe we do have to continue because we have to curtail Putin. Either way, let me know. 03444991000. Right, let's get to our first story of the hour now. And we need to revisit the growing scandal surrounding the BBC's shocking documentary, Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. This was, of course, foisted on the unsuspected British viewing public, without the BBC delivering us that slight nuance that the star of the show, the narrator, was the 13-year-old son of a Hamas official, a terrorist. He was actually the deputy Hamas agricultural minister, whatever the hell they do. Is there any agriculture in Gaza? I don't think so. As I kept saying, he was probably the deputy tunnel builder or something like that. But anyway, the BBC on Friday apologised and admitted serious flaws. Well, a new nuance has cropped up and we need to discuss it. Let's go straight to my guest on this issue, the ideal guest, actually. She's the boss of Defund the BBC, Rebecca Ryan. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, Kevin.
Right, first of all, the official that we need to, or the executive in question that we need to talk about is Deborah Turnus. Deborah Turnus is the chief executive of BBC News. I mean, in other less pompous organisations, she'd be called the news editor. But it being BBC and there are 500 bosses to do the same job, she's called Chief Executive of News. Now, it turns out, Rebecca, that 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks before this piece of propaganda, this shocking slice of propaganda, this anti-Israel, pro-Palestine propaganda was foisted on the viewing public, Deborah Turnus, the head of news at the BBC, sat down to watch it and said, that's effectively at the end of it, said, whoop-de-doo, marvellous, can't wait to see that on screen. We're now told that she didn't question it because it's possible she didn't question it because she'd assumed that full compliance had been applied, and that the BBC had done its due diligence. But she gets £410,000 a year. And she sat down, watched this, didn't ask any questions, and it went on the telly, and the rest is history. Now, I hate calling for people to lose their jobs, sack them and all that kind of stuff. But she gets £410,000 a year. Someone has got to take the blame for this. An appalling mistake has been made, and the BBC cannot do what it normally does, and that is just to sort of roll on and wait for it all to die down. They've got to do something here, and my suggestion is, I say it reluctantly because I don't like calling for people to lose their jobs, but Ms Turnus should be in the firing line. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, she can't just say, well, I assumed, as a manager, you can't assume, the buck stops with you. And it just shows the sheer arrogance, doesn't it, of them, that she thought, oh, we will have done our job on that, given the issues they'd had with the coverage of the Israel-Palestine issue over the, previous years. So for her to just be like, well, I assumed it was all okay. Absolutely, she has to go. But also, she was the one who set up BBC Verify. So for that reason alone, she should be resigning. This shows the sort of calibre of the woman.
Yeah, the BBC Verify that is always able to verify the wrong facts. Recently got everything wrong about agricultural production in Gaza because it confused acres with hectares. So that's BBC Verify for you. And the woman who runs BBC Verify, we subsequently found out, was slightly economical with the truth when it came to her own job application. So we don't have to pay any lip service to BBC Verify. It's a joke. But what is also more than a joke, this is serious, is this documentary, filmed by independent producers, cost £400,000. Quite why it cost that much, I don't quite know. Now, the BBC has conceded that some of that money, even if inadvertently, will have ended up in the pockets of Hamas. Now, the BBC should have been aware who was being paid for in this production. Now, even if you've got a kid, like this 13-year-old kid, obviously you couldn't possibly put that kid on the screen without the permission of his parents. Also, I'm afraid that in this nasty old venal world, there's always money involved. So the first thing that Mr. Hamas would have said, how much are you going to pay my kid? So by that backdoor route, there's no doubt whatsoever that taxpayers, that licence fee payers' money, BBC money, ended up in the pockets of an illegal terrorist organisation. The public, the people who spend their money on these TV licences, we deserve an explanation, don't we?
Absolutely we do. The British people don't want to be paying for a terrorist organisation. And for the BBC to just sort of, this hasn't happened and, we watched it through and we thought it was okay, it's just not acceptable. The fact that the BBC is able to tax British people for watching any live broadcast TV is based on the fact that they have this obligation to have journalistic excellence and to not be biased. And in both of those counts, they have failed again and again. But this is the worst example of it that we've seen, in that they are literally funding, putting money in the pockets of a terrorist organisation by just being so lackadaisical about, oh, we assumed it would all be fine. It's simply not good enough to assume that it's all going to be fine when you're spending British taxpayers' money and you're spending it in a region that is, is so heated, it's such a huge issue that causes the ripple effects across in our own country, causes terrorist issues in our own country, and causes the Jewish community to feel deeply uncomfortable in our own country as well. So for the BBC just to be wading around, spending British taxpayers' money however it sees fit without doing the proper checks is simply not acceptable. So absolutely, she should at least resign, because the buck has to stop somewhere.
Yes, because Tim Davie, the Director General, I don't think he's quite got on board the egregious nature of the situation, that actually this is so serious. The police considering a full-scale criminal investigation into why the state broadcaster gave some of its money to an illegal terrorist group, Hamas. This is really, really serious. And Tim Davie needs to understand that the public, the people who pay out, what is it now, 170 quid a year for their BBC licence, they deserve an outcome here. They deserve to be shown that the BBC is properly contrite about this, and just trundling on saying, well, Deborah, think you could have done better there, but don't let it happen again. And by the way, I take your point, if she just complacently assumed that all compliance had been adhered to and didn't ask any questions, that in itself begs a few questions. But it could be that. I mean, that's what we're being told now. That makes her look slightly better. Or is, and this is a fair question, is she so staggeringly useless that it didn't occur to her to ask any questions about this documentary?
Absolutely. Well, it's that level of arrogance, isn't it? And I think we can assume that there's some of that going on, because that's been going on at the BBC for all of, for decades. We've seen the long list of sex scandals that they've had to face up to, and all of the other bias issues that they have to deal with. They just kind of assume that, they're kind of doing the right thing because their heart's in the right place. They're these sort of bleeding heart, liberal, metropolitan elite kind of mindset where they just assume, it'll be okay. But it's not okay when it's particularly when it's in an issue that has these huge ramifications across the world, these sort of the terrorist implications, but also the unsettling nature for the Jewish community in the UK as well. And we saw after the BBC's reporting of that initial massacre, that they had Jewish people being intimidated in the street, being abused in the street, and it was absolutely awful. And the BBC was kind of on the side of that because it wouldn't call Hamas a terrorist organisation. And here we see them going one step further and putting money in their pockets.
I'd like to ask Tim Davie face to face, aren't you ashamed to be the Director General who is unable to respond meaningfully to the very serious allegation that the BBC, the state broadcaster, the publicly funded state broadcaster, is an anti-Semitic organisation? Because the way they have covered the Gaza war is frankly extremely disgracefully pro-Palestine and disgracefully anti-Israel. Everybody bloody well knows it. And Davie should hang his head in shame that he's allowed the BBC's journalists to descend so low. Here is the crux of the problem, though, Rebecca. There's going to be an independent review of this scandal, of what happened. An independent review. And who's going to carry it out? It's a guy called Peter Johnston. He's the BBC's Director of Editorial Complaints and Reviews. What's independent about that?
Exactly. And whose money is being spent on this so-called independent review, which we know will just be a whitewash? It's going to be more British taxpayers' money being thrown down the drain on an exercise that will essentially say, look, we're all very well-meaning here. We didn't mean to cause anyone any harm. But essentially what happened, with that documentary is that they broadcast anti-Semitism because then they just sort of changed the subtitles.
Yeah. Well, the protagonists were talking about evil Jews, dreadful Jews, and they turned it into the dreadful Jews, evil Jews. They turned it into the IDF forces. They took out all the prejudice to make it look as if it was an unprejudiced documentary. What went on there, I mean, it wasn't just that kid. There was another guy involved, a guy called Mr. Fofo. He was one of the cameramen. He's notorious for staging up specific faked anti-Israel footage. There's another kid who's been used in these propaganda films, these pro-Palestine. The whole thing was a mass of pro-Hamas propaganda, and nobody at the BBC saw fit to ask any questions, including Deborah Turner. Someone's got to pay the price for this.
Absolutely, and I think it seems to be that it should be her if she is the person ultimately who's responsible for this news output. And if she sat there and looked at it and thought, all seems fine, in what world do you not sort of question? Let's just double check that we've done our due diligence here. Yeah. She has not done that, and therefore she has to go.
Yeah, and I would say that I think she took over the job. I think she used to work at NBC, the American channel. I think she once worked at Channel 4 as well, but she came in on, I think it was like in 2021, three years ago. Davy and the powers that be at the BBC should ask themselves, in that period, in the period of her tenure, in the 3 years since she took control of the news department, what has happened to the reputation of BBC journalists, to the reputation of the BBC's news department? It's gone from being a setup that was admired around the world as studiously impartial and unbiased, to being a setup that everybody thinks is anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and disgustingly pro-Palestine. That's what she's allowed to happen, and that's a question that Tim Davie should ask himself when considering her future.
Absolutely, that's definitely happened under her watch. I mean, I think the BBC obviously, had major issues before then as well, but I think clearly on this issue between Israel and Palestine, we can see that again and again and again, the BBC has disgraced itself with its bias and its misreporting that's been extremely dangerous. And therefore, if she's the person that the buck stops with her, then absolutely she must resign.
Indeed. And what did you make of Gary Lineker, of course, joining the chorus of Guardian reading liberals who, 500 of them, sent an angry letter to Tim Davie and the BBC demanding the reinstigation of this, what they called essential piece of journalism. And it's like, I want to say to Gary, it is neither essential nor is it journalism. I mean, these people, it's just like anything that's anti-Palestine, anything that's pro-Israel, they're against, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, and how embarrassing for them when they actually, when the translation, the actual translation came to light that they're be calling for jihad against the Jews. I mean, maybe he does agree with that. I wouldn't like to say, but if he thinks that this is essential viewing when they're calling for jihad against Jews, I think we've got a major issue there with Gary Lineker. But it's not at all surprising, is it? Yeah,
it's Miriam Margolis, Juliet Stevenson, all the usual Mike Lee, all the usual suspects on this letter. One day after they delivered it to Broadcasting House, full of their own halo polishing virtue, the BBC admitted, grovellingly apologised. I mean, journalists always say apologies are grovelling, but this one really was. And admitting not just flaws, serious flaws. So this letter that they put in saying, restore this essential piece of journalism, they didn't even look into it. They just thought, what the BBC's done is a bit anti-Palestine, therefore we're against it. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. But we do need some action this time, Rebecca. And very good to speak to you as always. Thank you so much for your time. That's the great Rebecca Ryan. She's a campaigner and the boss of Defund the BBC, which I think we should do as a matter of urgency, particularly after this absolutely disgraceful saga of this piece of propaganda that they couldn't even be bothered to look into before they shoved out to the audience, to unsuspected viewers. If they knew that this kid was the son of a Hamas official, that opens up a whole new can of worms. But the fact they say they didn't know, well, you should have done. When they finally pulled it down from the iPlayer, not this Friday just gone, but the Friday before, they said, we're taking it down from the iPlayer in order to submit it to due diligence. That would be the due diligence you should have submitted it to before you broadcast it, isn't it? Let me know what you think about that. 03444991000. Next up, we're going to talk about the right to switch off. Angela Rayner thinks that bosses should not have the right to contact their staff out of work hours at all. By email, by phone, at all. They're trying to run businesses, Angela. You know, sometimes they're not going to do that all the time, but sometimes they might need to. Even Keir Starmer has recognised that, and so has the pretend solicitor, business secretary Jonathan Reynolds, and the pretend economist. Actually, she's a sort of semi-economist, isn't she? Rachel from Accounts. So stay tuned for that next. Stay where you are.
His Majesty has given a very gracious invitation to the President of the United States. He's done that on the basis that he recognises and knows that America is a deep ally of ours. You know, the depth of our relationship, not only is it historic, but it's a practical one on a day-to-day basis. They are our number one ally, and that visit will not happen immediately. We are consistent allies, and, you know, we should always work together to make state visits, support His Majesty in these endeavours to make these visits a success.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Now, let's talk about Angela Rayner. So she's got this workers' rights bill. It's a sort of throwback to the 1970s, you know. So everybody gets the right to do about a three-hour week, and they all get £1 million and 15 weeks holidays and only 2 days work, you know, all that sort of stuff that isn't very realistic. The least realistic clause in her swirling mass of fantasy nonsense about workers' rights was the right to switch off. This would be the clause in which it would be illegal for bosses to expect their staff to be contactable outside of working hours. So bosses would be, by law, banned from trying to email their staff, give their staff a ring for anything that might crop up outside of business hours. Now, there's a lot of businesses that would need that. I mean, my job, my whole career, I had to be contactable, actually 24/7 if you want to know it, but that's journalism for you. But so many businesses, the bosses have got to have the right to, you know, phone up the foreman or whoever if they need to for the business. It's called the right to switch off. Angela wanted that to be made illegal. Anyway, humiliation for the Deputy Prime Minister because both the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Chancellor Reeves, Robert Reeves, Rachel from Accounts, and the pretend solicitor Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, who likes to pretend he was a solicitor, although he didn't qualify. Well, both of them have signed up, have got rid of the right to switch off clause because they've been told by businesses this is mad. So it's gone. It's gone. It's going. Let's speak to Head of Campaigns at Popular Conservatism, Andrew Allison. Well, this is another moment, Andrew, where I think this Labour government, this idealistic Labour government, has been forced to confront reality. And just as Starmer did last week by diverting money from billions from our fatuous foreign aid budget into defence. We are not, or this government is not going to go along with this mad, insane right to switch off clause. Bosses will, after all, be able to contact their staff if they need to outside of work hours. And in what way, in what world would it have been sane to have anything else?
Well, there wouldn't, would there? As you've said, you had to be contactable as a journalist, pretty much 24/7. Me as a political campaigner, of course, messages come through. Messages come through at nearly midnight. I don't have to answer them. If I'm asleep, obviously, I don't answer them. And I answer them first thing in the morning. But the thing is, when you're running an operation, and especially if it's a smaller operation, then you have to get in touch with your staff. And most employers will try to avoid contacting their staff outside sort of reasonable hours anyway, after 9 o'clock in the evening or, before 6 a.m. or something like that. But there are times when that's needed. But this is simply an agreement that is made between the employer and the employee. And it's got absolutely nothing to do with government. But when you look at this employment rights bill, Kevin, gosh, there is page after page of more rules and regulations that are going to hit employers, such as flexible working, where employees are going to have the right twice a year to request flexible working. And then there's going to be statutory reasons why these things can be refused. It's just more and more red tape put onto employers. And I know employers who are saying, we're just not going to employ anybody else because it's just too much hassle. Now, how does that fit in with the government's growth agenda?
Exactly right. I mean, they keep talking about growth. We were talking earlier about sort of crazy Ed Miliband's net zero madness. That stands right in the way of growth. And interestingly, if we think about the events over the weekend leading on from Friday in the White House Oval Office, it looks as if Starmer, I don't know if he's going to get away with this, but he seems to be intent on leading us into more of this very expensive Ukraine war, and it looks as if we might start having to foot the bill ourselves. Britain taking most of the burden, billions and billions of pounds. How does that square with economic growth?
Well, the war in Ukraine is a completely separate issue, and I'm rather with Starmer, I'm afraid, on this one. I think that we do have to do everything that we can to help Ukraine.
Yeah, but what kind of practical help is there really going to be without America? I mean, if Starmer's just going to sort of spaff a load of our money pursuing this campaign in the East on our own with a couple of European countries, I don't think that would be a great use of our money.
It depends on how many of the European countries come on board, and of course it's very early days. But yes, we do need America on side.
Yeah, exactly.
And what happened on Friday was absolutely awful, and it shouldn't have happened. And it also highlights, I think, that normally when you have these type of negotiations, professional diplomats work behind the scenes, and all the politicians have to do is front up what has already been agreed. You certainly don't want to do that in front of the cameras. But we're living in a more dangerous world, and I mean, we've got the international aid budget that's, which I can't work out really, 0.7% of GDP. So if our GDP doubles, then we should automatically give twice as much money in aid. But if our GDP halves, then we should give half as much in aid. That just doesn't seem to make any sense to me at all. But I mean, there are savings that can certainly be made there. You know, the defence of the realm, Kevin, is the whole reason for government. I mean, it's their primary purpose is defence of the realm. And if we need to increase money on defence, which I think we certainly have to, then savings have to be made elsewhere. So we certainly can't increase taxes anymore, Kevin. I mean, taxes are getting up to almost a record high.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? And this is why this story, I mean, in itself is interesting, you know, the axing of the right to switch off. This is because a lot of businesses, business leaders, company owners and directors have told Jonathan Reynolds, the pretend solicitor business secretary, and Rachel from accounts, that this is just otherworldly. This is not planet Earth. You know, of course, bosses, you can't make it illegal for a boss to have to get hold of his foreman at 9 o'clock at night for some emergency, or even for something normal. I mean, you know, this is ridiculous. So I just think what's interesting about this story, because it's like what Starmer had to do with the foreign aid budget and defence, is that, and it will be like what they're going to have to do with Ed Miliband and net zero. This Labour government, with all its idealistic, highfalutin student politics kind of vision and ideas for what it wanted to do to make us such an enlightened socialist society, is finding out in the real world none of this claptrap works. And you've got to do practical, plausible things to make this country work, and that's why I think this story is interesting. It's the latest in a long line of our Labour government being confronted with and having to collide with reality, and I think that's quite an encouraging direction. If Keir Starmer is going to react sensibly to these situations, then slowly he can be dragged kicking and screaming into reality.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as I said at the beginning of this interview, Kevin, you know, businesses are already finding it hard to keep in business, to continue trading. There are plenty of laws and regulations that protect workers. We don't need a whole raft more, which is what this particular employment rights bill is doing. But I mean, when you talk about net zero, I read a report yesterday that Ed Miliband maybe shown the exit.
Yeah, we did that story a little earlier. On our knees praying.
Well, I think we all are, because if we want to see where we can save some money, and you look at the tens of billions of pounds that's being poured into this net zero nonsense, then why can't some of that money be put towards defence as well? You know, it's all about priorities and how we spend our money. I think that the government is showing signs of a reality, you know, experiencing a reality check here.
Exactly right.
But it's only early signs at the moment, Kevin.
Yeah, let's not get carried away with it. But
no, I would never get too carried away. Not with Starmer and Miliband.
Yeah, but we have to grab onto the small green shoots. You never know. Andrew, fantastic to talk to you as always. Thank you for your time. Andrew Allison, the head of campaigns at Popular Conservatism. We're going to take your calls next, and then we're going to talk to Vicky Unwin, a friend of mine whose daughter very sadly died of drugs, and she wants to legalise drugs, so it's quite interesting. We'll talk about that in just a little while. Your calls next. Stay where you are.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's go straight to the phones. First up, it's Carl in Liverpool. Hi, Carl.
Hi, Kev, you all right?
I'm all right. You want to talk about Trump and what happened on Friday? What's your take on it?
Well, I think it's a good thing, if I'm honest. It's put a spotlight on the UK and the rest of Europe to book up their ideas. I mean, you know, our army is absolutely battered. I don't think we could go to war if we wanted to be honest. But if he's thinking of putting boots on the ground, he'll be very, very sadly mistaken with you. We have a lot of people in the army, Kev, that are injured, feigning injuries, sick. You know, the numbers that people are talking about, you know, they could say 75,000, but you have to take into consideration a lot of the guys at the top of the tree. Then you've got your injured, you've got your wounded soldiers who are long-term injured.
Yeah.
I mean, and now it looks like the army's gone very, very woke.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I find strange about Starmer. I mean, my view is I kind of edge towards Trump. I say force a peace deal. Anything's better than these hundreds and thousands of young people dying in those horrific circumstances in the East there. I say let's try and force a peace deal. Let's put Zelensky at the table, make sure he agrees to everything, maybe get this mineral deal done and then see where we go. But what I find hard to understand, Carl, is all the sort of establishment, the great and the good, acting as if someone like me or you says, let's get a peace deal, that we've said something evil and wrong. It's like, we're going to do each other a peace deal. No. What? I mean, why? What's wrong with trying to seek peace?
There's money to be made from this, Kev. That's the problem. These people that sit there with the pens in the hand behind the desk, who don't know what it's like to put on a pair of boots and jump out of a plane, go into a battle, and they're all right signing the checks and for all the buddies and giving money out and stuff. And that's what ultimately all wars are always about, religion and money. And unfortunately, I don't see it happen. I don't see us going to war. I would love for Zelensky to get this peace treaty underway, but then, Kev, we've got to ask ourselves, how long will this last?
Yeah. Exactly right. But I mean, if we got a peace deal, if it lasted 5 years, it'd be worth it, wouldn't it? If it lasted 10 years, even better. I don't think Putin's going in anywhere anytime soon again, because he's rather depleted, to say the least. But I just feel that we should pursue what President Trump wants, which is a peace deal. Why don't we pursue it? I mean, let's get round the table, see where it gets us. I mean, just talking. As Winston Churchill once said, jaw is better than war. And I'm with him on that. Yeah. And did you care very much? Because I can't find myself caring that much about those scenes in the Oval Office. I think Trump and Vance were kind of staging it a bit. I didn't really care, did you?
No, almost like a playground scenario, you've done this and you're going to do this. I think there's a language barrier there as well with Zelensky, broken English, so obviously he could have felt intimidated. But the thing that I didn't care for it at all. I thought it would just be a nice chit-chat and then obviously they go away, they have a talk, but things got heated. I think there was a question of, why don't you wear a suit? That's irrelevant.
That was a load of nonsense. But I think
that's something that you don't ask a man whose country is going through what they're going through. And on the same hand, I mean, Zelensky could have stood a little bit firm and said, well, I'm not going to leave. I want to get this peace treaty done. Let's make it happen. And then we see him with...
Mind you, Carl, he literally got kicked out. He literally got kicked out. So he couldn't stick around. Listen, Carl, I think you and I are pretty much on the same page. I think we should pursue peace with caution, carefully, but demonising Trump for what he's trying to do, I don't quite understand. He's trying to stop hundreds of thousands of young people dying in a horrific conflict. Is it that bad? I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. Carl, great call. Thank you very much. Call me again. Carl in Liverpool there. Let's go to Terry in St Helens. Hello, Terry.
Hiya, Kev. There's something that's bothering me. I've got to say first.
Yeah.
It's really, really upsetting me. Why haven't you got a bumper sticker?
What, you mean a Mike Graham bumper sticker? I haven't got enough room on my bumper, I think. You know? He's a big guy. I can't get him on my bumper, you see.
No, you've got to take him on and beat him at it.
Oh, you mean I should get a bumper sticker as well, shouldn't I? Like the Kev bumper sticker.
No, I'm saying, yeah, you get a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, to be serious now about the point that you've made, I don't think we could take Russia on, and even if we had all European backing, we could never take Russia on.
That's what I find strange. This idea, you know, Starmer trying to say to, what does he call them, the coalition of the willing, you know, standing there with all those EU leaders who, trust me, if it came to boots on the ground time, most of them would disappear. They wouldn't be part of the coalition of the willing. They'd be the coalition of the unwilling. Right. We'd probably go in. The French would go in. We'd be on our own. No American help. Frankly, I don't think we're capable of maintaining that kind of an operation. So I don't know what planet Starmer thinks he's on at the moment, but Europe going it alone without American help to carry on backing Ukraine, I don't think it's viable.
No, I mean, I said right from the beginning when Ukraine was going to take on Russia that the might of Russia compared to the military and what they've got, you know, but they've just been carrying on a proxy war where the Americans have been supplying all the.
It's a weird ritualistic war, and the Europeans and Britain are like, oh, we've backed to the utter hilt. We've stood shoulder to shoulder square with them. Well, no, you haven't. You've given them money and weapons. You haven't actually gone in and fought with them. So even the level of our support is questionable. It's a strange kind of ritualistic dance that we seem to be involved in. And I think we should try and break this dance, end this dance, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. It just means we're going to spend absolute fortunes for years to come. Millions of young men will die, and we'll just go, it's very important to keep the geopolitical balance of power intact. Well, you know, I'm not so sure. Listen, Terry, point taken, very good call. I've got to move on. Thank you very much, though. Terry in St Helens, please call me again. Let's go to break now, and after the break, we're going to talk about the drug policy. Should we legalise drugs? So that next, stay tuned.
His Majesty has given a very gracious invitation to the President of the United States. He's done that on the basis that he recognises and knows that America is a deep ally of ours. You know, the depth of our relationship, not only is it historic, but it's a practical one on a day-to-day basis. They are our number one ally, and that visit will not happen immediately. We are consistent allies, and, you know, we should always work together to make state visits, support His Majesty in these endeavours to make these visits a success.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Well, let's talk about drugs. There's an organisation called Transform, and they're very keen on legalising cannabis in the UK. It would potentially bring a £1.5 billion annual tax windfall for the Treasury. There are lots of arguments in favour of it. My next guest is a friend, former neighbour of mine, who has her own story, which I think makes it sort of unusual that she is in favour of legalising at least cannabis. So a warm welcome to the show to Vicky Unwin. Hello, Vicky.
Hi, Kevin.
Now, I hope you don't mind, but we do have to talk about your lovely daughter, Louise, who, of course, I knew well as well. Louise, folks, a few years ago, I'm afraid she went to university and took too much ketamine and died. A tragedy that, of course, Vicky deals with every single day. Even affects me sometimes. I remember Louise very well, running around in the back garden as a little kid. So it's a sad, sad story. But I think we'll get to the details in a minute, Vicky, but it makes it kind of counterintuitive that you would be in favour, or so some would see it counterintuitive that you would be in favour of legalising at least some drugs. Explain why you are.
Well, I think if Louise had known how dangerous the drug was that she was taking, if she'd gone somewhere where she could have got it as a prescription from a pharmacist or some kind of regulated authority where she'd known it was pure and she was given a dosage, I think she'd be alive today. And I think that's the real thing about the legalization argument, is that nearly all children are experimenting with drugs, and the more you tell them not to, the more they will. I mean, that's what human beings do. They just like to be contrary. So I think the real reason for trying to legally regulate as opposed to just legalize is to make sure that the supply of drugs is safe and that we keep our children safe.
I mean, how would that... I mean, Transform have got an event tomorrow night. We'll try not to crash too much into the details of that because it's embargoed. But
it's till tomorrow.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, I know. That's why we're not going to crash into too much into the details. But this deals with cannabis legalisation. Yeah. But are you in favour of the legalisation of all what we would now currently call illegal drugs?
Yes, I am. I mean, there would be one or two exceptions. Maybe crack cocaine would be an exception. But on the whole, yes, because I think the more you drive drugs underground, the more it gets into the hands of criminal gangs, the more you have county lines, the more the supply is poisoned, and the more people die. So the whole message behind legalization or legal regulation is harm reduction. You can't stop people being addicted, say, to cocaine or heroin, and even ketamine, actually. It's a very dangerous drug and very addictive. But we're starting with cannabis because it's, you've got to start somewhere. You can't suddenly try and petition the UK government to legalise all drugs on day one. And, Sadiq Khan's made a start, actually, in London through his diversion policies. And that's happened in many other parts of Britain, where actually chief constables are really not interested in trying to stop and search and people for possessing cannabis or send them to jail. It is just a tremendous waste of police, court, prison time and money. So we've done this report based on our experiences in advising the governments in Germany and Canada and Malta. I mean, you name it, we've advised every single government in the world that's legalized cannabis. The only country that hasn't legalized cannabis to any degree is this country, which is completely mad, as we have the highest number of drug deaths in Europe. So this report is going to... You're going to... Do you want to interrupt me?
No. I was just going to...
The report is going to... I mean, we've come to the the initial number of 1.5 billion, and that's a very conservative number. But just to set that in a context of what you could do with 1.5 billion, you could give every child in Britain free school meals. You could actually give back the what do you call it? The heating bill.
It strikes me that's almost precisely how much the government saved when it stopped giving pensioners their winter fuel allowance, £1.4 billion.
I was looking for the winter. It's exactly that, but I'm just setting it in a context of what revenues. That's just strictly sort of tax revenues and a bit of this and a bit of that here and there. But if you think of the numbers of people we could keep out of jail, the amount of police time we could save, the amount of court time we could save. I mean, we have so many problems with overcrowding in prisons. The NHS, if you start to treat drug problems as a health issue rather than as a criminal issue, you're beginning to see some clear light of day.
So practically, if we came round to legalising drugs in general, recreational drugs. I mean, how, for example, would one go about getting your ketamine or your amphetamines or your cocaine? I mean, you go to a government shop or something?
Well, it would depend on what model you actually use, but we haven't got there quite yet in our framework for this country. But for cannabis, for instance, there are several different ways of legalising. You could legalise homegrown outfits, you could legalise community smoking outfits, or you could legalise and regulate government or privately owned enterprises, which would sell tried and tested drugs in dosages that are safe. Okay. Because, as you know, skunk is a big scourge, and that's because it's doctored. And that's why so many kids who take skunk have ongoing psychotic problems. So I think cannabis is a very sensible place to start.
Does it worry you, Vicky, that, I mean, for example, Colorado, where they legalised it, ironically, the first thing they spent the tax boon that they got from legalising cannabis on was on a new police station and a new courtroom, which is kind of funny. But what also happened there, Vicky, and this is what I'd like you to contemplate, is that the illegal cannabis dealing is prospering in Colorado and in other, because the legal sales are sort of monitored, and the amounts and everything like that. Also, there are age limits, so the illegal dealers can still prosper by ignoring all of that.
Well, that hasn't. Canada, which is has got the best legally regulated system that exists at the moment, that hasn't happened at all. And the problem with America is that they've just legalized, but they haven't regulated properly.
Right.
So you've got to be very clear that you legalize and you regulate and you decriminalize at the same time. And if our paper actually gives models as to how you do this, which would actually stop the drugs going underground. And in Canada, when they legalized and regulated, the price actually went down.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's quite a good argument where people say, it all goes underground and the price, the guys undercut the government shops and all the rest of it.
I'll tell you what I'd say, Vicky, about what you and your comrades are trying to do is it's about time that we actually sat down and thought about something different in terms of our approach to drugs. We've had politicians since the sort of mid-1960s talking about the war on drugs. I would suggest that now that it's 2025, we can write off that war and say that we lost it. So a different form of thinking is called for, and maybe your approach is the approach that we need.
Well, we've got a lot of cross-party support, actually. I think everyone's minds are a bit elsewhere, as your previous calls, and, whether it's in Gaza or whether it's in Ukraine or wherever. But this is an important issue, and it's actually not going to go away. I mean, the drug deaths are just going up exponentially in this country. It's really worrying.
Yes, it is. And, I mean, you say you got... I went through your list of supporters, and you're right, you've got a long list of cross-party politicians who support this. I mean, do you have are you optimistic that perhaps we might legalise cannabis at some point? We seem to be dragging our heels compared with most other modern Western nations, don't we?
Well, we've seen what happens when previously supportive governments of something get into power. Things sort of go topsy-turvy. I do think that at some point in the next, hopefully within this parliament, things will begin to change, because actually if you poll the general public, it is in favour of changing drug laws, especially on cannabis. And the problem is the politicians think it's a vote loser, but it isn't a vote loser, because all parents want to do is to keep their children safe, and they don't want county lines or criminal gangs or any of these awful things. They want police officers out there doing the right job.
Yeah, and millions of people who actually smoke cannabis. So, and the people who would support you probably the most would be police chiefs, because they can't stand policing cannabis because they don't feel that it is a sort of serious problem. So,
well, we've got a former CID drug squad person on our board, so we know exactly what the police think.
Yeah, so do I as well. I know a few ex-coppers as well. Vicky, great to talk to you. Good luck with your event tomorrow, and I'll see you very soon. That's Vicky Unwin, their campaigner for legalising drugs. Is she right? Should we legalise cannabis? Should we legalise all drugs? As I say, you might not agree with that, but our approach to the drug crisis so far, since the 1960s, just hasn't worked. It's a disaster, you know. Drug deaths, as Vicky just said, get worse and worse and worse. Do we need to change our approach? 03444991000. When we come back, China invading Taiwan could be a disaster. Stay tuned for that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. In about 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, we're going to take your calls. We're going to read some of your messages and we'll play some of your WhatsApp voice notes. Loads and loads of calls coming on about Trump, Vance, Zelensky, Europe, the future of Ukraine. Is Trump right to try and force a peace? I sort of think he is. I mean, you know, peace has got to be better than war. And it's what surprises me is the kind of the way so many of these European leaders and the establishment over here are throwing up their arms in horror at the very suggestion of peace, as if that's terrible. Now, I know we've got to be careful about Putin, but if we don't follow or if we don't react to Trump's initiative and we don't go down the fast path to some kind of deal, some kind of agreement to end this horrible conflict, it's just going to go on and on and on. It's going to cost us fortunes. You know, I just don't quite understand why Trump is coming in for so much criticism for trying to end this, even though if he's got skin in the game, America might get a good rare earth mineral deal and all that stuff. You know, surely peace is better than war. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Well, now there was an article in one of the papers over the weekend while we were all worrying about Ukraine, World War III, the potential for World War III. The chances are it probably isn't in Ukraine. That might not be the place where a relatively small conflict explodes into a global conflict. Where that may well happen would be Taiwan. Now, China is watching the Ukraine war, is watching what Russia gets out of this, is watching what Europe and America do to curtail Putin's power. China's watching. And China wants to take over Taiwan. Taiwan, a island not too far from China in the South Seas. And experts are convinced that Xi Jinping could be on the cusp of launching a full-scale assault fairly soon, possibly very soon. For reasons that I hope will emerge during my discussion with my excellent next guest. He is a security defence analyst, Colonel Simon Diggins. Thanks for joining us, Simon.
My pleasure, Kevin. My pleasure.
Good to talk about something that isn't Ukraine, but I think it's all linked, really. Now, there are signs that over the past few months, China has been ramping up its military power and its potential for invading Taiwan to a great extent. We know that they've almost completed construction of one of the biggest ships the world has ever seen, and apparently they're going to build more. It's called a massive amphibian landing craft. I think to all intents and purposes it's a sort of huge aircraft carrier that's 300 yards long with the potential for loads of planes to land there as well. Possibly more pertinently also, they're building, China is in the process of building 5 massive kind of roll-on, roll-off landing bridgeheads, which would be able to receive not only aircraft but also ships, and would be the classic kind of piece of kit that would be used from which to launch an invasion of somewhere like Taiwan. So we're watching that. 2 weeks ago, there were these very, very active war games on the part of China, with fighter jets circling Taiwan in their own airspace time and time again, plus Navy ships, Chinese Navy ships, out in Taiwan shipping lanes practicing their war games. Saber rattling on the part of Beijing, no doubt about it. All of which leads to the suspicion, the potential, that Xi Jinping could be planning an invasion quite soon, and the reason would be partly territorial, chest beating. Look, we're China, we've taken over Taiwan, but possibly more to the point, Taiwan produces 2/3, possibly as much as 90% of the world's semiconductors. Semiconductors are what makes computers work. Without Taiwan, the West would be deprived of the main component of computers. We wouldn't have computers. America Trump has just made an announcement saying we're really racking up our production of semiconductors. Well, they've been doing this for some time, but by common consent, it is unlikely that America will be in a position to be self-sufficient in terms of semiconductors for at least 7 or 8 years. Therefore, if Xi Jinping is going to invade Taiwan, he's going to do it before then, possibly much before then. The signs are worrying, are they not?
No, very much so. I mean, you've laid out really well, Kevin. Certainly for the last 18 months, we've seen a whole series of exercises which have become increasingly sophisticated. They start with naval exercises, we've had air exercises, initially started by day, then it's by night. We've had sort of fleets of Chinese ships circling Taiwan, and their exercises again has become more sophisticated. So they become sort of joint exercises with air and navy coming together. And as you rightly say, there's been a development of shipping, amphibious assault shipping, which can only really have one proper purpose, which essentially is to conduct a significant amphibious assault on Taiwan. Now, China does have other ambitions in the South China Sea. There's a whole series of island chains. They talk about this kind of the South China Sea being their territory, though no international law would recognize it as such. We've seen them building military bases on little atolls in the sea, areas that's disputed by the Philippines, by Vietnam, and various other countries as well. But the major amphibious shipping has really only got one role, which is to take over Taiwan. The timing is very interesting. It's put in immediate terms. A lot of the US, and the US is probably looking at it harder than anybody, a lot of the US experts suggesting somewhere around 2027 will be when China is kind of perfectly poised to do that. Now, this is where the coincidence comes in, because the analysis of what Russia is doing is if there is a kind of ceasefire, which will probably happen in the next year or so, maybe even less than that, then Russia would need time to reorganize, to reset after what's happened in Ukraine, and it'll be ready to go again in about 2027. So there is a theory, a grand theory, that both sets of dictators, and they are strongly linked, are looking for, if you like, the ability to do something in the next 2 to 3 years. That obviously sounds like a ghastly position to be in, but it's one of the reasons why, and one of the maybe better reasons why, the suggestion is Trump is keen to solve Ukraine so that he can focus on what they see as their major strategic competitor. Indeed, all US governments in 2014 have said is their major strategic competitor, which is China. So, yeah, it's a very dangerous place.
And let's get this straight. The reason we need to worry about Taiwan is, as the headline at the weekend stated, that if China attempts to invade Taiwan, it will make what's happening in Ukraine look like a tea party. In other words, there'll be no kind of ritualistic handing of money to Taiwan and look, you brave little island, defend yourself against China. The West will have to come in. And apparently the Americans already have a code name for the operation that will be triggered if China even shows signs of approaching Taiwan. It's called Operation Hellscape, which isn't very encouraging, to say the least. The first thing that would happen was if the West detected that Chinese ships, Chinese forces were on their way to Taiwan to invade, apparently the sky would blacken with a swarm of armed drones which would attack in their droves. So that's how it would start. Then after that, the West would have to start operating or responding militarily with jets, possibly ships. In other words, if China goes towards Taiwan, if we are convinced China is invading Taiwan, there'll be no ritualistic handing over of money and weapons. It will be war.
I've no doubt that all sorts of scenarios are being planned, and America's quite interesting in this one, because America has made no and makes no determination over sovereignty issues, which is why, curiously, there have been some sort of hands-off about the conversation over the Chagos Island. So it makes no comment about China's claim for sovereignty over Taiwan. It has, however, warned China not to take Taiwan by force and will not recognize a forcible takeover of that. Whether that would translate into fighting is still to be clear. And it's something I know that American planners think about, and you're rightly identified that they will have identified it as a potentially trigger for World War III, a horrific conflict between two superpowers in the area. What they would do, though, I think, is up for some speculation. Whether they would be in a position to pick up intelligence warnings that the Chinese were about to do something, and then they reinforce it quickly, whether they support Taiwan with weapons in advance. In other words, make Taiwan so unattractive a target the Chinese think twice about it, I think is something that they'll be thinking about at the moment. I suspect at the moment everyone's hoping they can somehow negotiate with the Chinese and persuade them that the consequences, which would hit China as well, of such a war would more than outweigh any advantage they might take by taking over Taiwan.
I'll tell you, it's interesting what you say about Trump and China and Taiwan. In one of his blizzard of press conferences, the guy has like 24/7 press conferences. One of the ones last week, can't remember which one, to be honest with you. I think it might have been when Starmer was in Washington. But he did say, so one of the press corps asked him in the White House, they said, what will you do about Taiwan? Are you worried about a potential Chinese invasion? And in his inimitable fashion, he said, I never talk about that. I never talk about that. What do you take from that response?
That I think he's very concerned about it, and that the normal Trump passing off and shoot from the lip performance, which we've seen across a lot of other very serious issues, doesn't really work. So that's why I'm saying that there is a reasonable, plausible explanation for his impatience with what's going on in Europe, is that actually his major concern is China and how do you deal with China. And that's sort of got through to him in a way other issues perhaps haven't done so.
And I think he's right there. I think we have China is a far greater threat than Russia ever can be, because unlike Russia, China is not only a military superpower, it's also an economic superpower. Russia has a smaller economy than Italy. It just spends most of it on weapons. So that's the nature of its power. In terms of what will Xi Jinping be looking at in terms of what's been going on over the past few days? The events, obviously, in the White House, in the Oval Office, that bust up, some of which I think was a bit stylized, but certainly Trump and Vance are trying to make some kind of declaration to the world. I don't think you can doubt Trump's sincerity in wanting peace. Possibly in wanting any kind of peace, but he definitely wants peace. What will Xi Jinping be looking at here, and what will he glean from it? What sort of signs of weakness might we be talking about?
Well, I think he's already got that. I mean, we've got there at the moment their kind of rubber stamp parliament, and also their National People's Congress, which is actually the kind of the Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, are actually meeting. They call it the two sessions, and these organisations meet simultaneously. They're actually meeting at the moment, and they were delighted by the chaos which they saw on Friday, and they've used it as a propaganda opportunity already to say to the world, this is what Western democracy looks like. It doesn't work. So they're using that already, and they've been watching this campaign in Ukraine really, really carefully. I mean, there is a view that there was even a possibility when soon after Putin invaded in February 22 that Taiwan would be attacked very soon afterwards. Then Putin was stopped quite quickly, and I think the Chinese then pulled back. The Chinese, and also in the past, have been very conservative with the Russians, and in exchange for some supply items, usually dual-use items to the Russians, have also restrained them in terms of things like nuclear weapons and everything that went with that. So we've had bellicose language from Putin. We've also the Chinese Communist Party saying, do not use nuclear weapons. This is not the time and place to do so. However, if Putin is shown to effectively to have won in his own terms as a result of the campaign and then the peace and the ceasefire that might follow, then that might indeed embolden Xi to do what he may do, which he's got his legacy to think about. And for him, his legacy is, I want to take over Taiwan. I want to completely unify all the China that existed prior to the Chinese Communist Revolution in 1949.
In terms of, Keir Starmer now, we saw over the weekend, seems to be oddly kind of restyling himself as Europe's warrior-in-chief, getting together what he optimistically called the coalition of the willing, which, trust me, push comes to shove, will turn into the coalition of the unwilling. He is assuming that yes, there's a very real possibility that fairly soon Europe won't have the backing of America in its support of Ukraine. But he's talked about sending boots on the ground to maintain the peace. Macron has said that the French might go in as well. But realistically, Simon, could Europe carry on backing Ukraine successfully without an American backstop? Because I'm doubtful, because mainly I think as things stood over the weekend it looked all right, but trust me, when push comes to shove, France, Germany, they'll all start dropping out. Without America, I think the prospects are pretty bleak, aren't they?
They are. I mean, I don't quite share your pessimism on that. I mean, I think actually the Europeans in the past have shown that they are capable. What they've not shown at the moment is the ability to hold together as a group. Mm-hmm. And that's been the most important thing the Americans have did, along with, let's be honest, providing a significant element of the umbrella which the Europeans weren't prepared to pay for. So there's two elements. One is the physical element of it. The second element is a infrastructure of, if you like, of will, and we're going to hold this whole thing together. The whole idea of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is not just about countries coming together. It's actually you're bridging the Atlantic from there. So it's going to be harder for the Europeans to do it, but the Europeans can do that. They have done it. There are some European federal military organizations which have existed. I've worked with them in places like Djibouti, and they're not ineffective, not least which because they've been used to working under the if you like, the NATO training auspice, so they understand how to work together from there. Whether politically, in terms of will, they can do that is really going to be a big test of it. But I don't think we have a choice. I mean, even if we cobble together something now in Ukraine, with or without a more or less willing America saying, here is the backstop for all this, the basic message that's come across, not just from President Trump or Vice President Vance or from Peter Hegseth, is you're on your own. And this is not new. This should not be news to our leaders. We had President Obama, always seen as friendly to Europe. President Obama in 2014 very clearly, very publicly said to the Western world, to NATO, that the American strategic pivot is now to the Pacific. So even if we manage to sort out this particular issue around here in Ukraine, we should have no doubts, no illusions whatsoever that we need to do something much more effective, much more kind of coherent and effective in holding our defence together within Europe. So, I mean, we don't really have a choice. I really do believe that. You're not wrong about some of the challenges that are there. You're absolutely spot on with all those. I'd recognise every single one of those. But I do believe, actually, with this kind of pressure we've got, we could actually make something work, but it will not be easy.
So to go back to how we started this conversation, the way we behave now, Europe, and for that matter, America, is very important in terms of the way the Red Dragon may behave going forward. So these are difficult times, tense times, yes, Simon?
I think I prefer the Chinese thing. You may live in interesting times. I think we've cracked that one.
Interesting times is one way of describing them. Simon, very interesting to talk to you, though, as always. Thank you so much for your time. Security defence analysis there, Simon Diggins. I mean, again, as I say, I get it. It's very important what we do going forward, but I'm just not thrilled by the fact it's people like Keir Starmer and Macron who are holding all the cards here, going forward. I'm getting a bit fed up with these people telling us what's good for us, just like they told us what's good for us in the COVID crisis. They're now telling us what's good for us when it comes to Ukraine. Maybe we should have a say in it. What do you think? 03444 991 1000. Also, I'm great respect for Simon, and almost certainly he's right and I'm wrong. but he showed some confidence that the European leaders will all get together and back Ukraine independently of America. I don't have that confidence. Do you? 03444991000. We're taking your calls after this break.
So in the papers, of course, there's loads of stuff about the Brit Awards. Here we are, Charlie XCX, five gongs.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about the Brit Awards is that it is obviously the celebration of the music industry by the music industry. And they do sometimes have a tendency just to hand them out to whoever sold the most records. I mean, I guess maybe that's what they should be doing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'll read a couple of messages, then we'll go to the phones. This is from Ali. Russia has thrown everything at Ukraine and can't beat them, so if it's us and France and Canada who put boots on the ground fighting alongside Ukraine, that could work. The Great Russian Army would be defeated. Why are we scared of Russia that can't even beat Ukraine? Oh, I don't know, because they got probably more nuclear weapons than anyone else apart from America. That's why we should be scared of Russia. And they are an awesome military machine. They really are. That's where all their efforts as a country go. So, and I mean, do you really have confidence that the European nations will all get together and do this on their own without American backing? Because I don't trust Germany to do it. I mean, they'll run a mile. Probably France will as well. The other countries, I mean, we're just not. I just don't see it. Let's go to the phones. I'll read some more messages in just a little while. We've got some WhatsApp voice notes as well to play you. So first up, though, let's go to Liverpool and talk to Paul. Hi, Paul.
Yeah, hi, Kev. What everyone's not mentioned, Kev, is that for the last 4 years, every leader in Europe, England, even the Democrats, they literally slaughtered Donald Trump. They persecuted them daily.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah.
Everything was thrown at him on every level. This guy has just now decided get lost. A lot of you, I just don't care.
It's exactly right. Yeah.
Or you'll just fight whatever battles you're going to get. And I'm pulling out.
Yeah.
And you know what? Kevy's right. If anyone persecuted you or one of members of your family for 4 solid years on every level with the most lawfare, I mean, saying racist, nasties, it is just shocking.
Yeah.
And now they're all thinking, oh, he's our mate. He's not. You still hate him in your heart.
Yeah, that's right. You're exactly right, Paul. Keir Starmer can't stand Donald Trump. No. That is a fact. And also, Paul, let's make no bones about it. The feeling is mutual. They don't like each other. They're from different planets, aren't they?
Trump doesn't like him because of the way he was with him.
Yeah. And there's not a there's barely a totally. And I just feel that look, if we don't pursue this peace that Trump is determined to force through, this war's just going to go on and on and on. And it seems to me that Starmer and some of the European leaders, at least, are perfectly willing for this to happen. For us to just keep giving them billions and billions and billions of pounds and weapons and aircraft to carry on this ritualistic war in the East. And Trump wants to stop it. Why is it such a bad thing?
Trump is right. There's 20-year-old kids in fields freezing, getting killed.
Yeah.
They're not Starmer's kids.
Yeah.
The money that Starmer's spending is your money, and the ladies, the grandmas who can't heat their homes, who spent 50 years working in the country, it's their money. It's like Starmer's not part of this. It's a movie to him.
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, I know there are difficulties, and I know we've got to be careful with Putin. Putin does need to be kept in check. But I just think peace is better than war. And what it seems to me that Starmer and the gang want to do is just to sort of trundle on and on and on with hundreds of thousands of basically kids, teenagers, 20-year-olds dying in the meat grinder. It's horrible. What's wrong with trying to end that?
Exactly, and it's horrible, and that's what none of them are getting. And that's Starmer. It's just like it's almost like he wants to play the respectable card. Oh, we'll stand up for this and for this. Mate, why didn't you go and get yourself a gun and get in that field and fight then? Because it's real for some people. It's just not real for you. I mean, how many? Nearly 1 million people between both sides have died.
Yeah.
That is literally.
The death count is just horrific. It's horrific. Paul, I'm with you, mate. I'm with you all the way. A really good call. Thank you very much. Paul in Liverpool. Marcus is a new caller, and he's in Wiltshire. Hello, Marcus.
Hello, Kevin. Yes, first time I've rung.
You're very welcome. Don't make it your last time. But what would you like to say?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, I know it's going on what you heard, is I think Russia drew the line in the sand too late with Ukraine. For over 10 years, maybe even 20 years, Putin was banging the table saying, we need to talk about Ukraine. We need to talk about Ukraine. And our Western governments ignored him. And eventually he had no choice because of the atrocities committed against the people of Lugansk and Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, being attacked just because they spoke Russian and because they were pro-Russian. They were being attacked by the Azov regiment of the Ukrainian army, and he invaded. He's kept the war in the east, I believe.
Well, I think he invaded for a number of reasons. Well, not least of which was his perception that NATO was progressing ever eastwards, setting up bigger and bigger bases nearer and nearer Russia. So he felt slightly threatened about that. But of course, the main reason Putin gets aggressive on the international stage is to keep his support going in Russia, because the Russians like Russia to be powerful. So he does that as well. So that's part of the reason. So there are a number of reasons, none of which I think we can particularly support. But I do think, I tend to agree with you, the West was pretty complacent in how much it thought it could get away with in terms of poking the bear, as they call it.
Yeah, we backed a coup and started a coup that overthrew the pro-Russian government in 2014. and that's when they started attacking the people in the eastern part of Ukraine.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's one of the arguments. I'm not going to get involved in that debate, but there are a lot of arguments to suggest that, there's reasons what Putin has done. But what I do think, Marcus, is whatever the reasons are for this horrible war, how about we go along with what Donald Trump's saying and at least get round the table, see if we can work something out. Russia, America and Ukraine around the table, see if we can work something out. What do you think?
Yeah, well, yeah, if you stop the war tomorrow, one more person not dying is a success. But you can't punch someone in the face and then say, well, look, let's just leave it there.
Yeah. Do you know what I think? I said at the beginning of the show, maybe I'm just being naive and facetious, but it just strikes me that the same people who, 2-3 years ago, were busy telling us we have to lock down forever and everyone's going to die of COVID and you better put your thoughts and your trust and your hopes in our laps because we're the political elite and we will save you from this danger. We will save you from COVID. The same people are now telling us we must put all our faith and hope and trust in them because they will save us from this developing situation in the East. It's just that I don't think I trust them anymore.
No, absolutely, I agree with you there. It's the same people that said that 800 people are dying a day of COVID. You
know what it is, Marcus? You know what it is? It's called the power of nightmares. Weak governments embrace terror and just tell the population there is this terror out there and we will protect you. And by that, they wield their power. And that's why, I'm not saying anything 100% here. I'm not sure entirely where I stand, but I'm not against President Trump. I don't give a damn about whether or not he bullied Zelensky in the Oval Office. Couldn't care less. If he didn't behave in the way that other world leaders want him to behave, I couldn't care less. And get used to it. Donald Trump goes about things his own way, so we've got to get used to that. That is all stuff and nonsense. And if he wants to try to force through a peace, then I think we should listen to him, get round the table, see what we can do. Marcus, really good first call. As I said, don't make it your last. Good to talk to you. Call me again. Marcus in Wiltshire there. Let's go to break. I've got lots of WhatsApp voice notes. We'll take more calls and I'll read some more of your messages. So lots still to come. Petri Hoskin in fairly near 10 o'clock to tell you what she's got lined up for your entertainment until 1 a.m. So you better stay tuned to talk. It's all going on here.
Across the UK, on on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We got a WhatsApp note, or a note from Nigel. He says, let's talk about the BBC and the fact it's giving money to Hamas. I'm not saying it'll make it better, but the BBC should be forced to give the IDF the same amount of money with the same amount of sentiment as they afforded Hamas. And publicly. Yeah, I'd like that, Nigel. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a nice idea. Let's play a couple of WhatsApp voice notes, maybe three. First off, these are all on Ukraine. First up, Leo.
The Army, Air Force and the Navy should refuse point blank to be deployed to Ukraine unless the government actually start deporting foreign criminals and fake asylum seekers first.
Leo, I hereby appoint you Immigration Secretary. It's not a bad idea. Nice thought. Tristan.
I was gravely offended by £2.6 billion going to Ukraine without any questions. It seems like because he had a bust-up with Trump, that's Zelensky, that is, that the government felt compelled to give him more money. To be honest, they should have told him to sling his hook.
Damn good point. You know, right in the slipstream of that astonishing bust-up in the Oval Office on Friday, Rachel from Accounts suddenly announces that we're going to give £2.6 billion more to Ukraine. A big gesture. You know, that's our money. So that they go, yeah, we're still foursquare behind Ukraine. Let's take some of these British taxpayers' billions and give them to Kiev. You know, I mean, what, you know, did they ask us? Is this part of their policy? Tristan, I think, makes a good point. Before we go to the phones, let's take one more WhatsApp voice note on Ukraine, and this one is Steve.
Right, Kev, it don't really matter what we think, whether we back Trump or Zelensky. We're just going to do whatever Zelensky says. He's reached that level of sainthood and unaccountability, and no one can say no to him, which also taps into why it went south at the White House the other day. He was used to just walking into the White House, seeing Sleepy Joe, and walking away with another few billions with no questions asked. He's a man who doesn't like to be told no, and unfortunately, we've got a Prime Minister who's going to go along with it, whether that means us sending troops, and it really worries me, this does.
Yeah, I agree, Steve. You know, Zelensky in many ways should be applauded. You know, he's led his country through this terrible war. But we have beatified this guy. We've deified him. We put him onto a pedestal. And it's become like the system in Britain and France and Europe where you're not allowed to criticise Saint Volodymyr. Well, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have stopped all that. And if he's been knocked off his pedestal, if he's going to have countries say, no, you just can't turn up here and say, give me billions and expect us to do so. If he's going to be deprived of that somewhat entitled attitude, I think that is a good thing. I think perhaps it was a reality check that was good for Zelensky. And as I say, I'm not interested in this ludicrous narrative. He was bullied. They bullied him. He's a grown man who's been involved in this atrocious war, leading his country, Ukraine, through this atrocious war against one of the great superpowers of the world, Russia, for 3 years. The most awful bloodshed he's presided over. He's not a bullying victim. You can't bully a man like that. Let's not be stupid. He's not a kid in a playground. So that narrative is pathetic. Frankly, I'm not very interested in what he wears or not either. I think having a go at him for not wearing a suit was an effort to wind him up a bit. But hey-ho, I don't care what he wears. And by the way, if he's so scruffy, let's get up a picture. Can we get up a picture of Elmer Funt, or whatever his name is, a.k.a. Elon Musk, going to the White House dressed as some kind of hunting guy? Because, look at this. So, you know, is that all that respectful to the White House? What he's got on there? He looks like he's just come back from the Catskill Mountains from a weekend of shooting deer or something, you know. So if Elon Musk's allowed to dress like this in the White House, why can't Zelensky? So there's a certain lack of equivalence there. I'll just bring that up. I mean, I know why they did it. They did it to wind Zelensky up. But they're not consistent when it comes to dress code, are they? If you think about what Elon Musk has worn. And I say that as someone who, frankly, I'm kind of on Trump's side on all of this. I think it is worth trying to change the dial and move us towards peace at as great a speed as possible. I don't want this to go on for years and years and years. And if we ignore Trump's peace initiative now, that's exactly what will happen. Years and years and years. And our sclerotic EU leaders seem to want that. Starmer kind of seems to want it. And all this, if we have peace, we have to have American backstop. Well, looks to me as if you're not going to get it. So if you have peace, get used to it without America's help, or you won't have peace. Ridiculous. Let me know what you think. 03444991000. Let's go to Elliot. He's in Bushy. Hello, Elliot.
Oh, hi. Good evening. I want to pick up on a comment you made earlier.
Sure.
I have to tell you. I think this is very important. So just bear with me, please. I have, and I don't believe any sensible person in this country has any faith in the European alliance or NATO actually standing up to Putin, or anyone for that matter, without America. We have run down our defences. The actual Secretary of State of the Labour government have said that our defences are not in any sure way to take on whoever. We can't even stop dinghies coming into Folkestone and Dover from Calais. I mean, we didn't bother when Putin went into Crimea. Yes, words are cheap, they're easy, but, you know, to increase defence expenditure, and 0.7% is nothing. If they really want to do something, they should tell you what it is in pure billions, and it's probably something like 5% of every individual NATO country to have any effect. And the key thing they don't tell you is the time they produce the equipment, train the men, put men on the ground, really see if this thing works. You're talking about 10 or 15 years. Yeah. We have run down our services, and NATO has, a lot of it due to that rotten Conservative Party, call themselves conservatives, conservation. They've ruined everything. Blair as well. We really are just deluding
I'm with you, Elliot.
I'm sorry to say.
I'm with you. This idea that Europe will go it alone and back Ukraine. I mean, European leaders, the EU leaders and Keir Starmer, they couldn't agree on the time of day. Let alone some kind of peacekeeping force to go into Ukraine and to ward off Putin and work together. I don't trust it. As you say, all of these countries, including us, have depleted our defence spending to virtually nothing. What have we got to fight Putin with anyway? What have we got to be a peacekeeping force?
You make a very good point. What have we got? Van der Leyen, who is now the Commissioner of Europe, she was Defence Minister or Secretary, whatever they call it in Germany, I think under that, I can't remember her name, that one that did all the Russian.
You mean Merkel?
Yes, and the German army had no guns.
Yeah, the broomstick handles instead of guns.
So can we please just be realistic? That this talk that we're going to come together, I wish it were true. I don't see it in a million years.
Yeah, I don't either. If we don't have American backstop, if Trump doesn't say we've got your back, I don't believe that Europe will carry on supporting Ukraine. So we're at a very delicate stage here, Elliot, and you make a very good point. Thank you for the call. Call me again any old time. That was Elliot making some good points in Bushy. Trump, by the way, lost his temper in particular at the point when Zelensky said the conclusion of this war, any kind of peace deal, is a long way off. Trump doesn't believe that. He thinks it could be forced through much quicker than a long way off. Do you think that? 03444991000. Let's go to break. I've got some more WhatsApp voice notes to play, and we'll talk more on the phone. So much still to come. Stay tuned.
His Majesty has given a very gracious invitation to the President of the United States. He's done that on the basis that he recognises and knows that America is a deep ally of ours. You know, the depth of our relationship, not only is it historic, but it's a practical one on a day-to-day basis. They are our number one ally, and that visit will not happen immediately. We are consistent allies, and, you know, we should always work together to make state visits, support His Majesty in these endeavours to make these visits a success.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's get through the rest of our WhatsApp voice notes and then we'll go back to the phone. So still on Ukraine, we had a Tristan before the break. You'll never guess, we got another one. There's a different Tristan. Take it away.
Hello, Kevin. It's the same thing with net zero, with this Ukraine war. It's the same thing. It's just pure, ridiculous arrogance and virtue signalling. We are impoverishing ourselves over absolute lunacy. And it's exactly the same thing that's happening with this war. We're going to impoverish ourselves just to try to make ourselves look good. Absolutely pathetic. And it's just useless. No common sense and logic again.
Yeah, I've got a lot of sympathy with what Tristan's saying. It's not that, you know, I mean, people could persuade me that there's a reason this war has to continue, I suppose, over about 20 drinks that they'd have to buy. It would take about 6 hours, but I might just about be convinced, I don't know. But what I don't understand is the complete fury and lack of enthusiasm for even talking about it, please. So this war has to continue. What has to continue? Why? And as Tristan quite rightly says, we're going to impoverish ourselves, just like we're impoverishing ourselves with this ludicrous net zero claptrap, just like we're impoverishing ourselves with our foreign aid budget and the money we send abroad. Just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Why don't we spend the money on us? Let's hear John, also on Ukraine.
Hey, Kevin, I could be wrong, but when Trump gets so upset about the number of people dying, I don't think it's just because of a humanitarian feeling of not wanting to see people die. This is a man who was nearly killed by a gunman, and I think that did change his perspective and maybe made him see life as a bit more precious than he did before.
I don't think there's any doubt that Donald Trump viscerally hates war. He hates war because, like any decent human being, he doesn't like the death and the destruction. But from his point of view, he's a businessman. He just sees loads and loads of billions of dollars and billions of pounds going to waste. It's all being wasted on some kind of conflict that isn't really getting anywhere. That, I think, is his view. Now, we've got a couple more WhatsApps. This is on the migrant crisis. Remember, we talked about that earlier in the show. 592 more migrants came across the channel illegally yesterday. That is the highest number in a single day this year. So, and still they come. The crisis continues to escalate, and basically the Prime Minister is going, let's talk about Ukraine, let's talk about Ukraine, let's talk about Donald Trump. No, Keir, let's talk about the migrant crisis, about which you are doing the square root of damn all. Here's Chloe on the crisis.
Hi, Kevin. I just wanted to point out this migrant business. If that was 600 Russian infantrymen that were arriving across from France, maybe in fast boats, would our military go out and stop them, I wonder? It's quite worrying, really, that we have absolutely no defence in our channel.
Well, Keir Starmer would probably set up a road map with a view to possibly setting up a force that could be ready to get into the channel in about 10 years' time. That would be his approach to it, a load of waffle that wouldn't achieve anything. Migrant crisis still. This is Judy.
The government will do absolutely nothing to stop them because they don't want to. They'll never stop them. It doesn't affect them. They'll never be pushed further down the housing queue for a council house or have to wait for a doctor's appointment. It doesn't affect them. So I think they just say, can't see the problem. And after all, they'll all be lovely Labour voters with everything we're giving them.
See, I'm sort of with Judy, or the general train of a conversation there, and this is what worries. You got these politicians telling us this is good for us. We've got to back up Ukraine. You don't understand. It's very geopolitics. We've got to keep Putin in check. We will protect you. We'll save you from a terrible fate. We'll keep you safe. The power of nightmares. If you don't have us, you'll have to be very, very threatened and very endangered. We are going to look after you, just like they told us in the COVID crisis. I'm just suspicious of these people. Could they organise a booze up in a damn brewery? I don't think so. And as for them all agreeing to go it alone without America to back up Ukraine, good luck with that. Let's go back to the phones. Petri will be in just a little while to tell you what she's got on her show tonight. But first, let's talk to Gordon in Sutton in Surrey. Hello, Gordon.
Good evening, Kevin. Nice to talk to my favourite Sutton Herald reporter.
There you go, yeah. Those were the days. That was a long time ago. But anyway, Ukraine.
I want to preface my comments by saying this. I'm no apologist for Putin. However, what I'm getting tired of is all these talking heads on the TV, all these experts, who all they want to do is continue a war. They all have their ideas, but no one has a way to stop it.
Exactly, Gordon. I don't understand. It's almost as if to suggest peace is to commit some kind of heresy. Yeah. Oh, Trump is a disgrace. Vance is a disgrace. Well, maybe, just maybe, they might be aiming to give Putin more than they should. Who knows? We don't know. But surely just the process, trying to get around the table to end this awful war, not the crime of the century, is it?
Well, for me, logic dictates, stopping a war is far better than propagating a war.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your comment you said before, something I do totally agree with you on, trusting these people. There's an old saying, I think it was from Goebbels, before you can control the population, you have to make the population frightened of you.
Yeah. It's called the power of nightmares. A well-known governmental technique. They used it massively during the COVID crisis.
And that's exactly what they're doing. And they did it in COVID, exactly.
Yeah.
And the people can't see that they're being manipulated. I mean, like I said, I'm not going to apologise for Putin. He's not my favourite person. However, this has been going on since 2009. They were offered a deal. Merkel signed it. The French signed it. Yeah. And they admitted later it was a stalling tactic. In 2022, they were offered a deal. Putin said he'll do it. The best deal they're ever going to get. And Johnson went across there and talked them out of it.
Yeah, Johnson was one of these guys who's really big on keeping the war going forever. As I say, when I hear all of these European leaders, including some, saying the war must continue, we must, and we must involve America, it just makes me think, well, what skin in the game have you got here? Why do you want this war to continue? Because it's not very good for your economies. It's not very good for the people of your countries. Why do you want to continue it? Why are you not interested in going along with Donald Trump for this rise? And what I didn't care about, one iota, I enjoyed the television, I adored the showbiz of it, was that bust up in the Oval Office. Everybody making way too much of that. Okay, you could say they were bullying him. You can't bully a guy like that. He may be physically smaller than them, but he's a grown man who's been through a hellish war for 3 years. You can't bully someone like that.
Yeah, I totally agree with it. The thing is, again, it's all about manipulation, about their vision to the public. And the public don't get it, unfortunately.
I think a lot of people in Britain have had enough of it. A lot of people in America, stop spending our money on this war. Let's try and work out a way to stop it. And I think that should be the way we go. So let's carry on with Donald Trump's plan. That's my view. Gordon, thank you for an excellent call. My regards to Sutton, my old patch. Let's go to Herbie in Harrow. Hi, Herbie.
Good evening, Kevin. How are you this evening?
I'm all right, mate. Yeah, I'm good.
Well, there's so much going on. Where do you start? Where do you finish? You're talking earlier on about the employment
You know, how can you not contact somebody if it's an urgent situation? Say your building's on fire and you've got all your property there and you belong. You want to know that you can go there and hopefully rescue it and save your business.
Well,
and also save you from working.
Now, look, think about this, Herbie. I mean, I know I work in a rarefied area, journalism and all that. I used to be a newspaper man. You know, my job has always required my boss, my bosses, to contact me on a 24/7 basis. So with this workers' right bill, what would they do about newspapers? What would they do about television news channels and all that? What would they do? Would that mean that the news editor's not allowed to call me? It's just, they don't take these things into consideration, do they?
Well, no, the thing is, they want the publicity of you actually contacting them on a news a breaking news situation. You know, they want to be contacted.